Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Female Naruto Had Two Brothers. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Later departure. A boy with hair and eyes are bright as gold stared curiously at an older girl blonde tied into short pigtails and eyes as blue as the ocean's depth. Ed, look, this is your new big sister, Naruto, his mom announced cheerily. Edward stared at the older girl, his sister, with wonder and awe. With chubby legs, he toddled towards her. Hi, sister, he greeted, toothily. I'm Edward. The girl smiled widely at him. Nice to meet you, Edward. I'm Naruto, she greeted in return, gently rubbing his head. Ed stood nervously as his mother searched for a nice pair of clothes to wear. They were going to take a family photo, she had told him, whatever that meant. Naruto was already dressed in a pale blue summer dress. Her blonde hair was tied into their usual pigtails. After he was neatly dressed in a burnt red shirt and brown shorts, his mom went to get his infant baby brother, Alphonse, ready as well. His big sister grabbed his smaller hands and followed after their mother as she led them into a room where Dad was along with a strange man with a camera. He couldn't understand a word his parents were saying, but as could, seeing as her face was scrunched up in confusion. Ed was picked up by Trisha as she held him out towards Hohenheim. His father tentatively placed his hands around his small waist as if he feared dropping him by accident. Edward let out a large, childish grin. He couldn't remember the last time his father held him. His whole body trembled with childlike joy. Who could blame him? He couldn't remember the last time his father picked him up, even if his grip was uneasy and unsure. His sister crawled onto their father's shoulder while their mother tenderly held their infant baby brother. They were one big, happy blonde family, all smiles and sunshine with no worry in the world as the photographer took their family picture. At least, that's what Ed thought. Now a little bigger, Edward and Alphonse sadly and dejectedly stood outside of the cracked door of their father's study watching the man on the desk, focusing on his research. Ever since their family photo, Hohenheim has been crammed inside his study reading those books of his. Ed and Al never understood why. Why won't Daddy play with them anymore? What was he doing that was so important that he would isolate himself in his room? Trisha and Naruto had left to go someplace, leaving the boys alone with their father. The boys were feeling extremely agitated and bored. When was their mother going to bring big sister back so she could play with them? Edward may be only 4, but he was more perceptive than most kids his age. His sister was starting to act strangely. There was nothing noticeable about her, but she seemed more tense and sad for some reason. He wondered if it was because Dad was no longer with them. That bastard walked out on them almost a year ago. He noticed how much Hohenheim's absence has affected their mother. Trisha tries to act like nothing was wrong, trying to strong for her kids, but they knew she was a little heartbroken from her husband's disappearance. Edward would never forgive his father for leaving them. Hurting him was one thing, but hurting his mother was another. He hated the sad look on his mother's face. So it wasn't after their father walked out on them that Ed and Al tried to study alchemy. They were hoping to find the reason for why he left, and also keep their mother happy. He remembered the first time he and Alphonse performed it. His mother smiled brightly, showering them with praises. Naruto tried to see if she could do alchemy as well, but it was too complicated for her to understand. Although she was a bit jealous that her 2 younger brothers could do something so cool that she couldn't be any prouder of them. Now it was Edward's turn to be worried about her. Through the cracked door of her room, he could see his sister staring sadly off into space. Peeking in further, he could see Naruto was actually staring at the small wooden horse he and Al alchemically made for her last birthday present. He remembered how happy and proud she was of them because of how much their alchemy improved in just a few months, slobbering them with kisses and hugs, much to Alphonse's delight while Edward groaned in disgust yet secretly happy. He frowned. So why? Why was she crying while staring at it? It both shocked and hurt Edward to see the shimmer of barely controlled tears in his sister's blue orbs, sticking against her long eyelashes. It was rare for her to cry. His sister never cries even when she broke her ankle when she fell off the tree that time after helping their mother pick some apples for her apple pie later that night. Why was she crying now? Did she not like wooden horse, after all? The door squeaked louder as Ed tried to shove himself closer. The noise the door made caused Naruto to whip her head around to see her little brother standing there, a look of confusion, worry, anger glowing in his golden eyes. She knew where that anger was directed at. Their father. She knew about the bitter resentment Edward held for Hohenheim for leaving them and causing a small painful rift in their family. Ed, Naruto spoke, questionably. What are you doing in my room? You should be in bed. She hopped out of her bed, clad in yellow pajamas, rushing towards him. Sister, why are you crying? Edward asked, skipping straight to the point. He charges at head first at the center of his concerns, no sense of tact at his young age. Golden eyes stared into his big sister's own blue ones, face twisting into one worried-driven confusion and painstaking sadness. Naruto blinked once then twice before her face contorted into a wide smile. Did I worry you, Ed? She asked, cheekily. Sorry about that. She affectionately rubbed his head. Edward frowned even more. He knew his sister was deliberately avoiding his question. He clenched his small fist. Is it Dad? He growled, lowly. Blonde brows rose in confusion. Huh, she said, dumbly. Her younger brother pushed away from her, his expression filled with rage and bitterness at the man who left them. Are you crying because Dad's gone? Naruko's expression disheartened slightly at the mere mention of their father. Watching Ed's face darken even more, she shook her head. Of course, she was somewhat saddened by Hohenheim's departure, but for some reason she never held it against the man, not like her little brother did. Originally being orphaned, she was just have to have someone to call a father, even if it was a short while. The older blonde shook her head vigorously. Ed, why do you hate Dad so much? Edward gritted his teeth, golden eyes gleaming with rage. The bastard ditched us, he yelled, furiously. Naruko frowned at that. She could perfectly understand her younger brother's bitterness towards their absent father, but having an absent dad was better than having no dad at all. At least, Hohenheim was alive somewhere. Ed watched as his sister gently stroked his cheek, blue eyes softened. Ed, you shouldn't be angry at Dad all the time, she advised, softly. Why shouldn't I? He argued, heatedly. He doesn't care about us. His whole body shook, golden eyes glancing at the floor, pain and sadness reflecting in them. He doesn't love us, he mumbled out, dejectedly. Seeing how hurt her brother was, Naruko pulled him into a hug, softly stroking the back of his head in a soothing manner. Edward, Father didn't leave because he hates us, Dadabeo. I'm sure Dad loves us, cherishes us. The Uzumaki would never forget the heartbroken expression Hohenheim wore as he walked out the door, suitcase in hand. I'm pretty sure Dad didn't really want to leave us, she continued. Then why did he? Edward's pained voice was muffled by her shirt. Sadly, Naruko couldn't answer that because she doesn't know the reason for their father's disappearance. She didn't know what to say to justify it, or even if she should justify a man leaving his wife and kids behind. There was only one thing she could say. Remember, Ed, no matter what, Dad had always and would always love us. Bonds aren't destroyed that easily. I'm pretty sure Mom and Dad love each other very much. He pulled away from her slightly, desperately staring into her eyes. Then why does Mom get sad whenever Dad's name is brought up? He asked, pleadingly, silently waiting for his sister's answer. There was short pause as Naruko contemplated her answer. Her blue eyes drifted out towards the window, staring at the moonlit night. She swallowed a thick lump in her throat, her heart twisting painfully in her chest. Sometimes, dear little brother, sometimes love is painful. Sometimes a person has to make sacrifices because they love someone and hold them very dear to their heart. And if you could overcome that agonizing pain, then you know that your love is real. Edward didn't realize at that moment that Naruko wasn't just speaking about their father, but about herself as well. Childishly oblivious to his older sister's soon-to-be departure. Oh, Edward squeaked out, painfully as he was hit by a wench. He glared up at his blonde-haired friend. What was that for, Winry? Winry huffed. Stop acting like such a jerk, you alchemy freak. Naruko shook her head in amusement as her younger brother and friend argue, heatedly. Alphonse clutched the back of her blue shirt, watching them both wary, gold eyes. This simple fight of many started because Winry wanted Naruko to braid her hair. Edward sneered at the request with disgust at doing something so girly, and jealousy at the young blonde preoccupying his older sibling's time. Naruko mused at that. Edward had always been jealous of anyone grabbing her attention away from him, even Winry and Alphonse. She remembered fondly at how Ed would angrily pout when Al scraped his knee, forcing his sister to tend wounds while Mother was busy making dinner, completely unaware. He even went as far as to deliberately injure himself, so her attention would be drawn from Al to Ed. The oldest blonde sibling had felt an extreme sense of happiness at how much Ed and Al adored her. Always begging, pleading for their sister to play with them whenever she wasn't busy helping Mom with chores. It was so favorably different from the blank, unfeeling stare she used to get her orphanage. Naruko was snapped out of her musings when Winry struck Edward on the head with another, indignantly calling him a stupid jerk. She wholeheartedly loved her adopted family. She wouldn't trade them for anything else in the world. Edward and Alphonse stood out the kitchen doorway, scared and worried. Their sister was in the other side talking with Mom. They couldn't make out the words that were being said, but sounds of distraught, hurt, and terror were clear. Brother, what do you think Sister is talking about with Mom? Al asked, nervously. Ed shook his head, sadly. I don't know, Al. He was frightfully worried. What was Mom discussing with their sister about that she needed to rush him and Al into bed early just so they wouldn't hear? Did you think it has something to do with why Mom leaves with Sister sometimes? His little brother's trembling voice broke Edward out of his depressive thoughts. Where do you think they go, Al? Ed asked, his younger brother. The boy of 4 pondered this immediately. It has been somewhere really secretive and girly if Mom can't bring us, Al concluded. Ed blenked at that. Well, if Mom wants to spend some girl time with Big Sister, then we shouldn't stop her, he answered, phrasing his words with much more tact than he would discussing about Winry than with Trisha. Edward and Alphonse jumped slightly in surprise as the kitchen door swung open to reveal a tear-stricken Naruko. Fretful and distressed, Ed and Al rushed to her side. Sister, what's wrong? Why are you crying? Hearing her brother's distraught and worried voices, Naruko bit the inside of her lips to keep herself from breaking down in front of them. Ed, Al, there's something. I have to tell you, Naruko spoke, quietly. She couldn't stop herself from trembling, her voice hoarse from her non-stop crying. What is it? Her 2 younger brothers asked, eager and scared. Does it have something to do with why their sister was crying? She mumbled something quietly under her breath, so quiet that Ed and Al couldn't hear. Huh, twin pair of blonde brows furrowed in confusion, trying to strain their ears to hear sister's barely contained voice. 2 words broke the boys. I'm leaving. Naruko was packed and ready to go, despairingly ready to leave her family and return to her place of birth for who knows how long. She was spotted by an upset Alphonse. The look of heartbreak on his face was truly agonizing. Small padded feet rushed towards her, hand clinging desperately at her shirt. Please, big sister, don't go, Alphonse sobbed. The older blonde shook her head, soberly. I can't. Why? Do you really have to leave? Sorry, Al, Naruko replied, softly, trying to remain strong. But I really have to go. She gave him a reassuring smile. I promise to come back someday. Don't even bother. A different furious voice rang out. Both Naruko and Alphonse turned their heads to see Edward standing there in the hallway, little hands balled into angrily trembling fists. We don't need you. You're abandoning us just like Dad did. Al gasped at the harshness of Ed's declaration. Ed, he cried out in disbelief. Naruko smiled, bitterly. She was expecting this sort of hostility from Edward. While Al had been pleading nonstop for her to stay, Ed had been avoiding her all week, sending her an occasional enraged and resentful glare every time their paths crossed. It broke her heart to see her dear little brother who absolutely adored her suddenly wanted nothing to do with her. She reached out towards him and softly and affectionately patted his head like she used to do. But instead of the usual happy grin she always received, a vicious growl erupted from Edward's throat as he angrily slapped her hand away as if it was contaminated. Stop it. Just leave already. Blue Eyes saddened immensely when Ed furiously refused to look at her. Naruko sighed dejectedly. She grabbed her bag and headed out the door, ignoring Al's cries and pleads for her not to leave. Closing the door behind her, Naruko finally let out the silent, depressive sobs she was desperately holding in. The Full Metal Sister. It's been so long since I set foot here. A woman with long, blonde hair with pieces braided on both sides of her face that led into a neat bun with her bangs framing her face stepped onto the resembled train platform. She had a slightly tan complexion, striking blue eyes, and pair of whisker-like birthmarks on each side of her smooth, flawless face. She wore an orange jacket with a white sash belt tied around the waist. It had stripes of black around the hems, sleeves, and waistline. She sported a black, slitted, short skirt and a pair of black leggings underneath, and a pair of short-heeled, black sandals adorned her feet. She yawned and stretched her aching limbs. As much as she missed train rides, sitting on one spot for days on end could really tighten the muscles, especially since she's used to constant daily physical activities. The young woman smiled to herself. I wonder how Ed, Al, and Winry are doing. Her expression saddened a bit, remembering the last time she ever stepped foot in Resemble. She slapped her cheeks together to perk herself up. No use of getting depressed over old memories. Time to hit the road. Winry, a young blonde girl of 16, was cleaning up the mess of her workshop. She had to do 3-day rush-hour job for Ed's automail because the stupid fool went and broke his. It's always so lively when those two are here, Winry mused, smiling fondly to herself. Her face then contorted into a small frown. Every time she thought about Edward and Alphonse and everything they are going through to just be normal again, a huge pang of sadness gripped her heart. Those boys have lost their entire family, in only a span of a few years. Their father left them, their older sister disappeared on them, saying there was somewhere she needed to be, and their mother died of illness. All they had left was each other. It was truly saddening. Winry wiped away the tears that were threatening to spill out. She snapped herself out of her upsetting thoughts when she heard Den's happy barks. Something good must have caught her attention. She walked outside her workshop and went towards the front door. What is it, Den? She asked her pet, knowing that the dog won't respond to her. But what she saw made her blue eyes widen in disbelief, tears threatening to pour out. An overwhelming sense of nostalgia and happiness swelled inside her, so much so that it was on the brink of bursting into a swirling volcano of hopeful ecstasy and coveted, blossoming warmth. Naruko, Winry's voice trembled, the uncertainty could be felt from miles away. The aforementioned woman was being smothered with kisses, courtesy of an overjoyed Den. When the older girl heard her name, she turned her gaze towards the mechanic and waved her hand, enthusiastically. Yo, Winry, long time no see, Databeo. Winry felt like her heart was going to burst. It really was her. Naruko was back. Oh, Databeo, I missed your cooking so much, Granny. Naruko shouted, happily as she scarfed down a plate of spaghetti and meatballs. It's here for you anytime, Naruko, Granny Pinako replied with a faint, nostalgic smile. The blonde woman nodded her head, still diligently slurping on the noodles. Winry took the time to stare at her long-lost friend. It's been over 10 years since she's last seen the girl. She took in her appearance and clothing. The clothes Naruko were pretty casual while have their own Naruko taste. Hint, hint, the orange coloring. Even though they weren't far off from being clothes that could pass an aimstress, but they also some sort of foreign taste to it. Though, the blonde mechanic could definitely see how much Naruko's body had grown. She had a very well-endowed and curvaceous figure, athletic and slim. The body of a mature, tomboyish woman, unlike her brash childlike self of the past. As Winry was watching her, Naruko was busy analyzing the girl's features from the corner of her eyes. The crybaby that used to follow her around sure did turn out to be a passionate, confident young woman. She also really filled out quite nicely in some places. Not as much as her, but still enough to be called a lovely young girl. So, Naruto. Naruto hummed a bit before turning her attention towards Winry. The younger girl's sharp gaze told her that she was about to ask her a serious question. 100% likely to be why she left all those years ago. And there was no way she's leaving out of this one. Where were you? The blonde mechanic asked, sternly. When you left, all you said was that you had somewhere to be. The older woman let out a nervous chuckle while scratching the back of your head. Boy, how was she going to explain this? She couldn't say she was dragged back home because of a demon fox dwelling inside, became a ninja, a deadly assassin, was chased around by an international criminal organization known as the Akatsuki, participated in a gruesome war and became recognized and famous as the heroine of the Fourth Great Ninja War all across the elemental continent, and dreams to becoming the leader of her hometown village, the Hokage, which is not that far off. She shook her head. No, she couldn't tell Winry that. The story would seem incredibly unrealistic and absurdly far-fetched. Plus, she didn't want to meet a wrench to the face. That's Ed's job. I had to return to my place of birth, Naruto finally answered. They didn't like that I left, even if I was just a baby. Then why didn't you ask for permission to stay with Ed and Al? Winry shot back, suspiciously. Damn, when did Winry get so sharp? Well, the elders of my hometown are very strict. Nobody is allowed to leave until they are 18. Half-truths are better than lies. Blue Eyes stared into Blue Eyes as the blonde mechanic contemplated her older friend's words. She slowly nodded her head, seeming to accept that explanation. The Uzumaki let out a sigh of relief. What happened to your hand? Naruto instantly froze at the question. She bit the inside of her lip, painful memories flooding. Why did Pinako have asked that question? She was hoping that both Granny and Winry would be too unwilling to pry into her personal life to ask why her right hand was covered in bandages, for fear of upsetting her after being away for so long. Naruto was unable to respond. What the hell could she say? She couldn't say she had fight with her rival turned best friend turned evil to decide the fate of world. And the battle ended up costing both their arms as a tragic yet lucky result. I was in an accident, she half lied. Don't worry, it's nothing serious. Winry and Pinako didn't believe her for a second, but decided to let it slide. For now, are you planning to visit your younger brothers? Pinako opted to change the topic. Oh, yes, Databeo. Naruto beamed, fondly. I haven't seen them since they were little kids following me around everywhere. I wonder how those two idiot brothers of mine are doing. They are probably in Central now, Pinako answered her, taking a smoke out her pipe. They said something about doing some research at the library. She huffed out a small smoke, eyes grazing critically at Naruto. They tend to travel around a lot. Something flickered in Naruto's blue eyes, a fluid of emotions akin to guilt, hurt, and sadness. Yeah, I heard. On her way here, Naruto heard rumors about the famous Fullmetal Alchemist, hero of the people, Elric brothers, whatever people wanted to call them. She wasn't interested in rumors like that. What she was most curious about was the description of the two boys. Two brothers, but one had automail limbs and the other was dressed in a giant suit of armor. That's the whole point of why I came here, the Uzumaki said, admittedly. It's been 10 years since I've last seen Ed and Al. I just want to see how they are doing. She sheepishly rubbed the back of her head. Although, I have no idea what to say to them, or even what to do when I see them. Naruto knew Edward was furious with her for walking out on them, just like their father. It's not like she had a choice in the matter. Like her brothers, she didn't know why she had to return back to her village. It wasn't until a few years later that she found out why the elders were so adamant about her return. She was the Jinchuriki of Kurama, the nine-tailed fox. The Uzumaki clenched her hand over her stomach. Those first few years living back in Konoha were a living nightmare filled with pain and loneliness. It hurt even more to know what it was like to be cared for and loved, only for it to turn into resentment and hatred in just a few short days. She was so glad that she didn't bring Ed and Al with her. She didn't want them to suffer because of her. Thinking about the family and friends she had here, waiting for her return one day, helped her push through all the pain and agony. If not that, she would have turned rogue long ago. Naruto. Naruto blinked her eyes and glanced over at Winry, who was looking at her with concern. Was she that lost in thought? What's wrong? Winry asked. You kind of space out there. Oh, I was just thinking about the last time I saw Edward and Alphonse, Naruto half lied. Our parting wasn't really the happiest. She gave a bittersweet. I mean, Al couldn't stop crying and Ed was so angry with me, he wouldn't speak to me at all. I want to see them, but I don't really expect them to forgive me. Naruto, the mechanic began, blue eyes shimmering with sympathy. The blonde older woman shook her head. I know, Databeo. I was a lousy sister, leaving them like that. Her face then set into puzzled gaze. By the way, what happened to our house? When I went over there, everything was burned to the ground. What happened? Both Pinako and Winry gave her saddened and regretful looks, which made Naruto's guilt worsen. Something happened while she was away. Something terribly tragic. Blue eyes narrowed with suspicion and anger. Something happened. Tell me. Simple words, but she said it with so much inner fury. If someone had hurt her dear little brothers, there was going to be hell to pay. Finally, it was Pinako who spoke. I don't think it's our place to tell, she started, solemnly. But I would say this much. After you left, Ed became a state alchemist. He and Al burnt down the house as symbol of their resolve not turned back. A frown formed on the whiskered woman's face. That wasn't resolve. They were running away, she mumbled under her breath. Huh, what you say, Naruto? Banako asked, voicing her confusion. Naruto let out a lopsided grin, waving her hands in front of her. Nothing, Databeo. The elder Rockbell stared at her for a few seconds, then nodded her head, seeming to let it go. The Uzumaki let out a silent breath of relief before her face turned grin. She knew Granny Panako and Winry were staying silent about Edward and Alphonse. They didn't tell her everything, but they did say was more than enough for her to pick up on. Being a ninja, Naruto was keen on gathering information from what was and wasn't said. Although she wasn't as sharp, perceptive, or have cunning deductive skills like Sasuke, Kakashi-sensei, or Shikamaru, she isn't that dim-witted either. Something happened to Ed and Al while she was away. Something terrifying enough to cause them to burn down their house and run away. Even worse, to make her younger brother join the Amstress military as a state alchemist. And now, Naruto knows her brother. She knows Ed. He had never once cared about the military when they were little. So why was he a state alchemist? Many scenarios raced through her head for the various reasons for why her little, head-headed brother would join the army. The one reason that stuck out the most and seemed the most reasonable was because he was hoping to gain something out of it. The Uzumaki pursed her lips, pondering this for a moment. She had heard that state alchemists get access to top-secret research material that's unavailable to the public. However, she also didn't think that was enough to garner Edward's attention. Ed wasn't the type of person who mindlessly obey over some petty papers. Naruto felt a tinge of sadness, hurt, and guilt. Did her leaving really affected Edward and Alphonse that much? The stronger the love, the stronger the hate would be when that love is lost. That notion was something she learned growing up as a ninja. Almost every villain she encountered were motivated by their loss of love. Whether it'd be familial, platonic, or romantic love, it was all the same. Naruto held back a sigh. No use on dwelling on it. It is what it is. So, Naruto. The Uzumaki snapped out of her stifling musings to turn her attention towards Winry. When are you leaving? Winry asked, frowning. Naruto had to resist the urge to giggle as she saw a trickle of tears at the corner of her blue eyes. There's the crybaby Winry she used to know. The older blonde pondered this for a brief moment. I'll probably leave first thing in the morning. What? The mechanic exclaimed in disbelief. I haven't seen you in 10 years, and this is how you leave. God, you're worse than Ed and Al. The Uzumaki gave a sheepish laugh. I'm sorry, she responded, awkwardly. She tilted her head towards Panako. Where's the bathroom? I'm going to go take a shower then visit Mom's grave afterwards. The elder Rockbell nodded her head before giving Naruto directions to the bathroom, which the blonde ninja graciously accepted. Naruto entered the bathroom and closed the door. Once locked, she headed over to the bathtub to get the water running. She stripped herself out of her clothes, pieces of articles falling on the floor one by one to slowly reveal the body of a beautiful, curvaceous woman. However, her body wasn't completely flawless, devoid of all blemishes or injury. First, there was her obvious bandaged right arm. Since there was nothing covering it, it revealed just how much of arm were wrapped in white bandages, and that was most of arm. The only skin that could be seen were the area her right shoulder. Even if one were to remove the white wrappings, they would see that it wasn't her arm at all. The skin was horribly pale white color in contrast to her normally slightly tanned one. Luckily, the wrappings were not that easy to remove as they were glued to her prosthetic arm with some sort of sealing jutsu. Makes the first Hokage, Hashirama Senju, cells more controllable, so it doesn't easily overwhelm her. Another marking on her skin that stood out was fist-sized scar on the left side of her chest just above her breast. She sunk herself deeper in the water to hide the scar. A huge tinge of sadness and betrayal also tightens around her chest, her heart every time she looks at the wound. It was the same injury she received from Sasuke's Chidori during their first battle at the Final Valley during their preteen years. Although she managed to deflect the blow from her heart, it still hit her lung, damaging a vital organ. If it wasn't for Kurama, she would have been dead. Even so, even if Sasuke, throughout his years as a rogue ninja, had caused her a tremendous and heartbreaking amount of emotional and physical pain, she still couldn't bring herself to hate him. People would start to think she was some type of masochist, chasing after a guy that tried to kill her several times. But giving up on him was unacceptable. Sasuke was her best friend, someone she has an unbreakable bond with, someone who shares her pain of solitude. Giving up on him is no different than giving up on herself. I'll save Sasuke. Those are the words Naruto promised, words that she etched onto her soul. At first those words were simply spoken to her other teammate Sakura to help the pink-haired Kunoichi ease her pain. However, deep down, it was really meant to dull the pain in her heart. The pain of betrayal and heartbreak that twisted painfully in her heart. 4 years. It took 4 years, a war, and a fight to the death to make the stupid Uchiha come back to his senses. Stupid Sasuke. Naruto grumbled as she got out of the tub and began drying herself with the towel. He's such an idiotic, hot-headed bastard thinking he could shoulder everything on his own. She let a happy smile grace her lips. At least, he's back. I wonder what he's doing now. After getting fully dressed, Naruto decided to visit her mother's grave with Den marching by her side. The blonde took the route with fewer people. She didn't want any of the locals to notice that she was here. She wished that she could just run across the trees and rooftops, but she couldn't. Not with Den happily paddling by her side. And Den was no ninja dog, not like Akamaru or Kakashi-sensei's summonings, so Naruto was just having to take a leisurely walk through the road, trying to as noticeable as possible. The blonde Kunoichi finally made it to the cemetery. She walked through all the tombs, studying all the names until her blue eyes landed on specific one. Teresa Elric, 1878 to 1904. Beloved wife and mother. Naruto felt a series of different as she stared, dejected at the tomb before her. Regret, longing, sadness, and love. A small torrent of emotional currents swirled around her. She heard from one of younger brother's letter that her foster mother died of illness. That was around the time Granny Tsunade was appointed as 5th Hokage. She wondered if she had snuck out and brought Teresa to the leaf, would Tsunade be able to cure her sickness? Then her mom wouldn't have died. She would have been able to reunite her now and see her beautiful smiling face along with teen versions of Edward and Alphonse now. Don't beat yourself over something that happened in the past, Naruto, Kurama's voice rang inside her mind. It's not like you could have prevented her death. Naruto frowned. But I could have brought her to the village to help her. And you think you would have been allowed to leave the village to someplace far away, especially the fact it's not even in the elemental nations. The fox replied back, sarcastically. The blonde Kunoichi remained silent, knowing that the fox was right. With her status as a Jinchuriki, there's no way they would have let her leave the continent. It was because she was a Jinchuriki that she was forcibly brought back in the first place. Blue eyes glanced down at the tomb before her. She took a deep breath and told her deceased adopted mother everything. She told her about her days in the academy and her rivalry with Sasuke and Iruka-sensei. She spoke about how she ended up on the same team as him, another girl named Sakura Haruno who was infatuated with him, and a laid-back Jonin teacher, Kakashi Haddock, who was always late to their meetings and eventually became the 6th and current Hokage of the Hidden Leaf Village. Naruto discussed her first serious mission to escort a bridge builder, Zabuza and Haku, and how their mission changed everything for her. She told about the Chunin exams and the other Rookie 9, and how excited and anxious she felt to match up her strengths against other worthy contenders. Unfortunately, there was an attack on the village, so the rest of the exam was cancelled. After that, the blonde woman explained how she met Jiraiya, one of the 3 legendary Sannin, who was a super pervert, but also really powerful and reliable. She ended up going on journey with him to meet Tsunade, another of the Sannin, so the older woman could become the 6th Hokage, since the 3rd Hokage was killed by Orochimaru, the last of the Sannin. Despairingly, she told the deceased Teresa about how she got into a really bad fight with Sasuke, and how, unbeknownst to her at the time because she was way too childish and naive, that Sasuke ran away from the village and became a rogue ninja to join up with Orochimaru. She tried hard to stop him, but all she was left with was a crushing defeat and broken heart. She voiced her regret about how she knew how alone he was, how she knew he was probably traumatized over the massacre of his entire family, but she just so jealous at the time. He was so good at everything he did. She admired him and declared he was her role model that she wanted to surpass one day. If she wasn't so stupidly childish, Naruto would have seen the darkness growing inside Sasuke's heart day by day. She pretended she understood him, but, in reality, she didn't understand a single about him. She projected her own false image onto him, expecting him to live up to her expectations without worry. How stupid and selfish was she to just assume that everything would remain fine. Even Sakura knew that something was wrong with Sasuke before she even did. She was so very, very stupid. Naruto declared how she went on the 3-year-long training journey with Jiraiya to become strong enough to bring Sasuke back to the village and stand up against the Akatsuki, the group powerful S-class rogue ninjas, who are after Jinchuriki like her, people who house a tailed beast inside their body. She spoke about the sorrow and anguish she felt when Jiraiya died, her sage training, and Pain's attack on the leaf. Naruto detailed the overwhelming, breathless joy, exhilarating happiness, and all the pent-up sadness and turmoil she felt when finally met her birth parents, the 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze, and his wife, Kushina Uzumaki. Well, their spirits anyway. After that, came the 4th Great Shinobi War. It was a war that decided the fate of the shinobi world. Lots of people, so many ninjas sacrificed their lives for the sake of the world. She told of pain and suffering she felt at seeing her comrades' deaths. But the confidence and happiness as she felt fighting by her friends was even more powerful. It was the reason she was able to keep going, and letting guys like Madara and Kaguya run freely was not an option. She couldn't let those fiends lay a hand on her little brothers. Naruto that there was soft tears streaming down her face as she told her deceased adopter mother about the many adventures she went. The pain and sorrow of feeling someone close to her suffer, the tragedy of war, and most of all, the joy and happiness she felt throughout her life as a ninja. When she was a little girl forcibly returning to the village, the blonde Uzumaki dreaded it with every fiber of her being. The cold glares, sneers of disgust, blatantly being ignored. A part often wondered how long it was before she snapped. And she would have to, if not for Iruka-sensei, and for that, she's forever grateful to her old academy teachers and his heartfelt, encouraging words. Then let out a low whine as she licked the tears away, causing Naruto to giggle slightly. "I'm okay, girl, I'm okay." The blonde woman softly patted the dog's head. I guess seeing Mom again brought up some old feelings. She stood up on her legs, staring out into the distance. More precisely, at the house where she used to live with her adopted family, or what was supposed to be her old family home. There was nothing broken woods in the scorched grassland around the area. All right, let's go see what my two little brothers were hiding. 5 minutes later, Naruto made it to the rumble of her old home. Something smells suspicious, Naruto, Kurama spoke, cautiously. Naruto had to agree. She had ominous, foreboding sensation echoing the further she went into her home. Even Den's whines were an indicator that something gruesome and horrifying happened here while she was gone. The blonde Kunoichi began moving and kicking away each rubble. The closer she got, the more the smell of decay and dried blood penetrated her nostrils. Her eyebrows furrowed as across the area of what seemed like dusty, white chalk of what she guessed a deformed transmutation circle with all the missing lines and faded designs and patterns. However, what got the Jinchuriki's attention were the blotches of dried cake blood all over the floor. It didn't take a genius to know that something horrific happened. Naruto bit the inside lip as a tinge of guilt pounded against her heart. The sense of decay was strong. Whatever her brothers did was buried underneath here, especially since the ground had been dug up not too long ago. She let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding as she began digging away at the ground using wind chakra. Dan tilted her head in confusion before trotted over to the spot Naruto was digging at. She gave it an experimental sniff before using her front paws to help remove the dirt. Naruto knew what that circle meant. She had hoped to high heaven that her brothers wouldn't do anything extremely crazy. Unfortunately, she could understand why Edward and Alphonse would be tempted to perform the dreaded, forbidden human transmutation. Grief could drive the sanest to the darkest pits of despair and insanity. Sasuke is a prime example. He was a happy and quiet child before the slaughter of his family. The whole incident turned him to an extremely introverted, revenge-obsessed, international criminal. She could only hope that her brothers turned out a little better than Sasuke. The blonde Kunoichi finally uncovered something. She used her bare hands to quickly remove the dirt to get a better look. Her blue eyes lowered in sadness and regret. What she found was a piece of bone and a strand of black hair. Not brown. This was not Mom. Whoever this person was not Trisha Elric. Naruto bit her lips so hard that a trickle of blood started to flow out. She clutched the chest where her heart laid, as if trying to keep it from bursting from the raw ache she was feeling. Ed and Al have probably spent years figuring out human transmutation, only to realize all of their efforts were a total waste of time. Did they know what the maid was not Mom? Or did they flee in fright before confirming anything? She balled her hands into fists. If only she was here. If only she was here, as their big sister, she could have stopped them from making this mistake. Well, I'm off to see my idiot brothers, Naruto replied, happily. She was already packed and ready to board the train. I don't see you for 10 years, Naruto, and this is how you leave. Winry cried in frustration. The older blonde woman sheepishly rubbed the back of her head. I'm sorry, the blonde mechanic sighed. You really are worse than Ed and Al. I wanted to see Edward and Alphonse while they are still in Central, Naruto explained. Who knows where my wayward brothers wind up next. I'll miss my chance to see them. Both Winry and Pinako had anime sweat drops at the Naruto's dramatics. Well, don't try to destroy too much of Central, Pinako said with a smile. Don't forget to visit us sometime. Okay, Naruto, Winry proclaimed, tearfully. Naruto smiled, nostalgically. Now, there's the crybaby Winry she missed. She gave both the Rockbells a hug. Thanks for letting me stay. It was nice seeing again, Winry, Granny. You're welcome back anytime, Naruto, the elderly Rockbell replied. The blonde Kunoichi removed herself and began boarding the train. Well, bye. She waved goodbye to them as they said their goodbyes back. Once they were out of sight, Naruto went to take her seat. Now, let's see what my two idiot brothers have been doing all these years. Shattered pedestal. Sister, wait. A little Edward cried as he ran as fast as his stubby feet could take him. The darkness surrounding him was too great. No matter how hard he tried to catch up to his big sister, the distance between them gets bigger and bigger. Why was his sister leaving him behind? Did he do something wrong? Was he bad? Sister, please. Ed wailed. Wait up. Don't leave me. Sister. Ed woke up with a start. He wiped away the sweat that were forming on his forehead, taking slow breaths to calm his accelerating heartbeats. Brother. Ed's golden eyes searched for the hollow-like voice of his younger brother, who sitting against the wall on the far side of the bed he was sleeping on. Brother, did you have a dream? Al asked him in a worried-filled tone. Yeah. Edward clenched his teeth in anger of who he was dreaming about. I was dreaming about her, he growled out, lowly. Alphonse didn't need to say anything. He instantly knew what he meant by her. He sighed and glanced out the window. It was a bright and sunny day. It's been over 10 years since they've last seen her. He could completely understand Ed's anger. Even he gets depressed at times at the mention of their sister. What do you want to do, brother? Alphonse asked, mainly hoping to take his older brother's mind off Naruto. Edward let out a frustrated while scratching the side of his head. There's nothing to do. Until Sheska finishes recreated Dr. Marco's notes, we can't really do anything. They both sat in silence, contemplating on what to do. Well, I'm going to go find something to eat, the elder Elric spoke after a few moments. Ed didn't wait for his brother to speak as he leisurely climbed out the bed and headed towards the bathroom to take a quick shower. It wasn't long before the two brothers found themselves wandering aimlessly through the streets of Central with their two bodyguards, Maria Ross and Denny Brosh, in tow. Edward decided to take a stop at a nearby cafe. "So, what do we do now, brother?" Al asked as a plate of bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich, crepe topped with whipped cream and syrup, and 2 coffee mugs were set before them. The Fullmetal Alchemist paused in his meal for a second to regard his younger brother. Al brought up a legitimate question. What were they supposed to do while they wait for copies of Dr. Marco's notes? He glanced over to his brother to see that he had his head hung down, staring at his lap. Thanks to his armored helmet, Ed couldn't see Al's facial expression. However, Edward had gotten accustomed to Alphonse's moods over the years, and he could vaguely tell that his younger brother was feeling sad, woefully lugubrious. The blond boy had to bit his lip to keep himself from letting out an angry growl. Why did he have to bring up her? He was angry at himself for even mentioning her, but he was furious at his sister for leaving them. It's been 10 years, 10 fucking years, and they haven't even gotten a single letter from her. He would never forget the day she left, the day she ripped a hole in the family. After that day, nothing was the same anymore. From playing to eating, there was always this feeling of emptiness that just wouldn't go away, no matter how hard he tried to keep the rest of the family together. Edward couldn't never understand why. Why would she suddenly leave them like that? Didn't she know how much she hurt Al and made Mom suffer? Begrudgingly, Ed could admit there was a time where he absolutely loved and adored his older sister, Naruto. However, those feelings died the day she abandoned them. The burning anger, crushing sorrow, and utter disappointment he felt that day drilled a hole inside his heart that thundered ferociously, along with the pain of betrayal he suffered because someone so close to him, that he had known his entire life, would just abandon him as if all their time together meant nothing to her. The Fullmetal Alchemist became disillusioned of the fact that Naruto was a kind and caring older sister. He would never forgive her for walking out on them. He still remembered the days where Alphonse would cry nonstop. He even cried himself to sleep sometimes. The thought of it left a bitter taste in his mouth. Nobody messes with his little brother. Mom, when is big sister coming back? Trisha winced at the depressive tone producing from her youngest son's mouth. She sported a smile as she turned to face her sons, who were sitting at the dining table waiting for dinner to be served. She tried to strong for them, no showing her inner turmoil. Al, your sister will come back someday, their mother reassured them. Well, when is someday? Edward exclaimed, angrily, but Trisha could sense the hurt in his voice. She's not coming back, is she, Mom? He voiced out, accusingly. She doesn't care about us, she left us. The brown-haired woman let out a startled gasp at her elder son's accusation. That's not true, Ed. Your sister loves us very much. Then why did she leave? Trisha stood there frozen at Alphonse's question, unable to form words that would sate her children's hurt and anger. Her lips turned downward into a small frown. Boys, listen. Your sister is special. Ed rose a disbelieving brow. Special. Trisha nodded her head slowly. Your sister has a lot of responsibilities. But don't worry, she'd definitely come back one day. One day, when you boys are older, you'd understand. The brown-haired woman stood up from her kneeling position. I'll better go get dinner. She headed into the kitchen and returned minutes later with bowls of ramen in her hand. Oh, look at that. Yes, I made Naruto's favorite meal without even thinking. As she set the bowls down, Edward could see a silver of tear at the corner of his mother's eyelashes. Seeing that made his bite the inside of his lip in anger. He'd never forgive his sister for abandoning them. Ed closed his eyes at the bitter memories. Brother, Al called his name in concern. The elder Elric sighed and shook his head. It's nothing, Al. Come on, let's head to the library. Maybe we'll find something that would help us decode Dr. Marco's notes. We'd need all the information we can get on the Philosopher's Stone. Edward quickly paid for the meal, putting the money on the table, and dashed off without a second thought. Hey, wait for me, brother, Alphonse called out, chasing after him. And here the two brothers were, in the library, looking for anything that might pertain to Dr. Marco's research notes. Notes that haven't even looked at yet. But truthfully, Edward just wanted to go to the library to forget ever recalling his no-good sister in that stupid dream. Unfortunately, the exact opposite happened. He couldn't concentrate on the books he was trying to read. Instead, his mind drifted towards his sister. No, he shouldn't be calling her that. The term sister became unbefitting of her the moment she walked out the door. His thoughts drifted towards Naruto. Memories of his time with her invaded his head like a plague. Ever since that dream, he couldn't stop dwelling on memories of his past. His past with her. What are you guys doing? Naruto asked. She was in the middle of doing her chores when she found her brothers in their dad's study. She put the broom she was holding down and looked over Ed's shoulder to see what he was reading. Eventually, her face scrunched up in confusion. I don't understand this mumble-jumble, Databeo. What is this? She asked, plucking the book from Ed's hands. Edward pouted, annoyed. Hey, give that back, sister. He snatched the book back. And it's not mumble-jumble. It's alchemy. Sapphire eyes blinked in puzzlement. Alchemy? What's that? Alchemy is a type of science, sister, Alphonse explained. Naruto rose a skeptical eyebrow. Science? You guys want to be scientists? She let out a snort. Lame. Science is not lame. Ed yelled, indignantly. He looked offended at his elder sister's insult at his passion. It's awesome. People have used science to create lots of amazing things. He then sent a glare towards Naruto, but she knew it was a playful, challenging one. And what do you consider to be not lame? The Uzumaki smirked, proudly, pointing a smug finger at herself. Me, of course. Both Ed and Al gave her a look of disbelief. Sister, sometimes your ego is bigger than your head, Edward sighed, shaking his head. Naruko frowned at that notion. Oh, yeah, she charged at Edward, her hands going to his waist, tickling him to death. Stop it, sister, her younger brother cried between laughs. He was completely at her mercy. Stop, sister, or I'll tell Mom, he threatened, but he didn't sound very convincing between all the laughter and all. I won't stop, Ed, Naruko declared, evilly. Not until you admit I'm awesome. Never, Ed barely voiced out. He tried using his tiny hands to push his sister off of him, but to no avail. His sister was bigger and stronger than he was. What's going on here? Just then, Trisha came in through the door. Her curious green eyes gazed around the room to see books scattered across the floor as usual. I heard Ed screaming from all down the hall. She looked upon her kids to see Alphonse giving her a sheepish smile while Edward and Naruko were engaged in a one-sided tickle fight. Okay, that's enough, Naruko. Ed can't breathe. Trisha gently lifted her eldest child off of her younger brother. Edward took lots of deep breaths, trying to refill his lungs with oxygen. Thanks, Mom, he wheezed out, breathless. Sister is evil. She tried to tickle me to death. Naruko childishly stuck her tongue out at him. That's what you get for mocking me. Edward pouted, angrily, giving her a childlike glare in return. All right, that's enough you two. You shouldn't be fighting, Trisha scolded, lightly. Naruko, return to your chores. Ed, Al, clean up your father's study. Yes, Mom, all three kids said in unison, feeling guilty at being scolded. What do you mean you're leaving? Edward shouted at his sister, his tiny hands balled into angry fists. It was early morning, the day after Naruko tearfully announced her departure. Edward was full of doubt, confusion, and pain that he didn't say anything about her leaving when she first told him and Alphonse about it. In fact, he was in complete denial last night. He thought that he misheard or that his mind was playing tricks at him. There was no way his kind and loving older sister was abandoning him. Just no way. But the more and more he thought about it, the more fearful he became of his worst nightmare coming true. And that fear eventually turned into anger. Why was she leaving them? What reason could there be? Or was it perhaps Naruko didn't like them anymore? When he got angry, Ed tended not to think straight. All thoughts of tact and logic were completely thrown out the window. He needed to confront his sister and demand her to tell him why she's leaving. Not to mention, she made Al cry. His younger brother was sobbing despairingly all last night. He cried all throughout the night until he tired himself out. It broke Ed's heart to see his brother in such sorrow and knowing that he was helpless. There was nothing he could say to cheer Al up, no words of comfort he could offer him. How could Edward even comfort him anyway when he was such disarray himself? Naruko was leaving them just like their father. His blood was boiling with rage, his body trembling with fury, and his heart was thumping violently with painstaking sadness. He had to confront his sister. Waiting this out any longer would drive him mad with grief. That's why the first thing that Edward did when he woke was look for Naruko. He eventually found her tended to their mother's garden. Without any form of plan, he marched right up to her, which led them to the situation they are currently. Edward. Naruko's face contorted into one of guilt at seeing the pain and anger in her younger brother's eyes. Tell me why you're leaving, Ed demanded, teeth gritting so hard she could hear them crack. Naruko towards her disheartened gaze away from Edward's accusatory ones. Edward, that's something I can't tell you. She quickly elaborated her reasoning when she saw Ed's glower. Remember, Ed, when I told you that there are things people do because they hold something dear? She spoke, softly. Well, this is one of those moments. I'm leaving, but don't think I love you guys any less. You guys are very precious to me. One day, I'm sure you'd understand, Edward. And don't worry, I'll be back one day. She smiled, cheerfully. Edward's bangs shadowed the upper half of his face. Liar, he breathed, voice inaudible. You're a liar, Naruko. He yelled, glaring at his sister with such fury and hate that she took a step back in shock. If you really loved us, you wouldn't leave us. You made Al and Mom cry. You wouldn't have done that if you cared about us. Edward, Naruko uttered, voice filled with hurt. She reached out towards her little brother who flinched away from her as if her touch burned him. No, go away. I'd never want to see you again. With that, Edward angrily stormed away, leaving Naruko alone in the garden. He didn't turn back to realize a single tear falling from his sister's face. And that's the last time I've spoke to her, Edward thought. His face was contorted into an angry scowl. She left about a week later, but during that time, Ed never spoke to his older sister again. How could he? She abandoned them just like him. It was few years after that his mom fell sick and died. Brother, Edward yelped, startled out of his musings. He stared up to see his armored younger brother leaning over him. Al, don't scare me like that. Sorry, brother, but you were spacing out, Al explained. I've been standing here for the past 2 minutes calling you. What were you daydreaming about anyway? Ed climbed onto his feet. Nothing, Al, he said, dismissively. Alphonse put his hands on his hips, dubious about his brother's behavior. Is this about sister? He asked, his tone laced with seriousness and worry at his older brother's strange behavior. You miss her. I miss her, too, brother. I wonder what she's doing. Who cares about her? Edward hissed, vehemently. She ditched us, Al. If it wasn't for her, then Mom would still be alive now. Brother, calm down. The armored boy whispered back, frantically. No, Al, I would not calm down. The elder Alric refused. He started going off on tangent about what terrible sister they had. Alphonse had to quickly cover Edward's mouth when a few people started to glare at them when they went to investigate what was making all that racket. Sorry about that, Al apologized. Go back to your reading. He let out a sigh of relief when, after a few grumblings about annoying brats, the onlookers went back to their own business. Edward just huffed and briskly walked away. No use staying in the library any longer if he couldn't concentrate on what he was reading. Brother, wait up. Alphonse quickly rushed to catch up to him, his feet clanging against the wooden floor. He saw his brother freeze when he stepped outside the door. What's wrong, Ed? Edward's golden eyes were wide with shock and disbelief as he pointed a shaky finger over to where he was looking at. Alphonse trailed his brother's finger and he let out a stunned gasp at the scene. Not the actual scene, but who was in it. I'm sorry, ma'am, Maria spoke to the young blonde, blue-eyed woman in an authoritative manner. But if I don't know who you are, then I'm afraid we can't let you see Full Metal. For all we know, you could be here to harm him. Naruto scoffed, throwing her hands on her hips. Oh, please, what is he? A child that needs to be babysitted and protected. Oh, right. She swiftly retracted her statement when the black-haired woman gave a dubious look. She forgot that Ed should only be 15 by now, and, according to this country, that was still considered being a child. She herself is just legal enough to be called an adult here, being 18 and all. It's much different than in the elemental nations. As soon as she put on her leaf headband, she was practically considered an adult in most people's eyes. She could already do whatever she wanted, except, doing actual adult things. There was difference between being treated like an adult and actually being an adult. And in the Warring States era, as soon as kids were trained decently enough, they were considered an adult by the age of 6 and sent off to the battlefield to fight in an endless war. No wonder the life expectancy of that time period was barely 30. This country was different, so much different. Naruto opened her mouth to convince the woman to let her see her younger brothers. After all, Pinako told her they would most likely be in the library, and that, thanks to Sage Mode, which she activated and dispelled earlier, she could feel their presence in the building. She didn't get the chance to though when a couple of frantic voices cut her off. Sister. Her blue eyes widened slightly as she trailed her gaze up the top of the steps. Her initial shock disappeared and she let out a bright smile. Yo, Ed, L. Long time no see. A siblings reunion. Yo, Ed, L. Long time no see, Databeo. Edward and Alphonse just stared wide-eyed and slack-jawed as if they were seeing a ghost. Was it her? The sunny, blonde hair, the sun-kissed skin, those indistinguishable whisker marks at each side of her face, and that awfully familiar verbal tick. There was only one person the brothers knew who would have those types of markings. No doubt about it, really was her. Naruto was back. Sister. Al's trembling called out to her, flabbergasted and apprehensively, as if he was afraid that if he called her, she might disappear again like 10 years ago. If he had a heartbeat, it'd be thumping so wildly in his chest, he would be able to hear it pounding loudly against his ear. Well, what are doing there, standing like a couple of idiots? Come on and greet your older sister. Naruto shouted, cheerfully, a bright grin on her face, ignoring the Full Metal's bodyguard's shocked stutters. Alphonse immediately took the initiative and rushed down towards his sister, pulling her into a bone-crushing hug. Edward, on the other hand, made no attempt to move. He glared down, hatefully at Naruto, his face set into a deep, angry scowl. What was she doing here? He watched as Al talked animatedly or as animatedly as an animated suit of armor could with her, asking her questions after questions. Ed, however, didn't feel the same jubilant happiness at being reunited with Naruto. He marched down the stairs, golden eyes full of contempt. Edward, Naruto called, happily once she saw him approaching them. The Full Metal alchemist sneered and viciously shrugged away her attempts to hug him. Is that any way to treat your elder sibling, you little brat? Naruto pouted. Ed's face immediately turned an angry red as tick marks spread across his face. Who the hell are you calling little? He launched at Naruto, trying to punch her face in. She casually sidestepped his attempt though, and watched with amusement as he unceremoniously fell against the pavement. Still Ed's trigger word. Naruto asked her youngest brother. Yep, Al replied with a sigh. Anyway, Al. She stared up at him, bright blue eyes taking in his armored form. Why are you dressed in a suit of armor? Al seemed to fidget nervously under his older sister's scrutinizing gaze. Oh, it's comfortably, he replied, lamely. A slender, blonde eyebrow rose. Is that so? Blue eyes scanned his tall, well-built armored features. You've gotten so tall. She sent a pointed look towards her other brother's way. Edward, how could you allow yourself to be so much shorter than Alphonse? Edward fumed from his spot on the ground. Shut up, he yelled, indignantly. Al chuckled a bit. Anyway, sister, where have you been all this time? Naruto nervously scratched the back of her head. How would she explain this to her brothers? She debated whether to give the same excuse she gave to Winry. However, she knew Ed and Al would not be satisfied with that. They would try to poke holes in her story, especially Edward. He would ask questions after questions until he was completely and utterly satisfied. Why are you even here? Edward snarled. Naruto ignored his contemptuous tone and frowned at him. What? A girl can't visit her younger brothers. A gaze softened. I promised I would, didn't I? Ed's temper immediately flared, an angry growl escaping from his mouth, lips pulled back into a vicious snarl, ready to rip her a new one. Yeah, 10 years ago. You didn't bother to show up for Mom's funeral. "Brother," Alphonse softly reprimanded him, keeping him from attacking their sister out of spite. Edward was glaring at her with so much detest and anger, but she could see it. The pain swelling deep within his molten golden orbs. It was easy to spot it after going through so much pain herself. Although she couldn't see Alphonse's face because of his helmet, his body was practically oozing with hurt and sorrow. Naruto casted her cerulean blue eyes away from her brother's gazes, an overwhelming amount of guilt gnawing at her heart. "I'm sorry," she apologized, weakly. She inwardly flinched as more guilt ate away at her because, right now, she refused to tell them the truth. The Uzumaki bravely met her brother's piercing and pleading stares. She took in a deep breath. She offered a lopsided smile, trying to ease the tension. "What can I say? I got lost on the path of life." She knew she gave such an Kakashi-like answer, but it was the vague truth. The truth without the details. And judging by expressions on Ed's and Al's faces, they weren't the least bit satisfied. "What the fuck?" Edward yelled with both rage and disapproval in his voice. His voice was so loud, everyone except Alphonse had to momentarily cover their ears. A small crowd was beginning to gather. "You've been gone for 10 years, 10 goddamn years, and that's all you could say." Ignoring the crowd of noisy people, Naruto locked her onto Edward's furiously trembling form. It was taking every ounce of his willpower not to pounce on her, she could tell. "What do you expect me to say?" She argued back, however, her voice was awfully quiet, subconsciously placing a hand on her stomach. "It doesn't matter what I say. It doesn't change the fact that I left, Dad left, and Mom's dead. Nothing I say changes the past, Edward." With the same hand, Naruto reached out towards him, but quickly retracted it back. "Why, you probably wouldn't want me doing that anymore," she whispered, dejectedly. Ed could feel the last of his restraint snapping. He was about to offer an angry retort until Al's panicked gasp cut him off. "Sister, your hand." Naruto raised a confused eyebrow before a sudden realization dawned on her. Edward turned his gaze towards Alphonse with a look of puzzlement before turning his attention at Al's source of worry. His attention was immediately to something he was not expecting, Naruto's bandaged right hand. "What happened to your hand?" Ed asked, plain and simple, more out of curiosity than anything. He tried to keep the concern and worry from his tone, remembering that this was the sister that left. In his opinion, she didn't deserve his sympathy. She racked her brain for a believable, something that would sate Ed's curiosity and Al's worry. "My hand got burned in a house that caught on fire, saving children." Naruto didn't know whether to flinch or pat herself on the back. The excuse was something would do. In fact, she's done a few times during her career as a shinobi. But she's never gotten injured in a house fire. That would be really pathetic of her. "That's horrible." Alphonse's frantic voice pierced through the air. He marched up her, taking a bandaged hand. "You should have a doctor look at it." "No." The Uzumaki quickly retracted her hand out of reflex. She knew if she went to the hospital they would try to take off the bandage, or get her to do it thanks to the seals, and reveal the pale prosthetic underneath. Quickly realizing her mistake, she reiterated. A doctor had already seen it." She quickly decided to change the subject upon noticing Edward's scrutinizing eyes. He was definitely suspicious. "What are you guys doing in Central?" she asked. "Why aren't you back home with Winry and Granny Pinocchio?" A foreboding sense of pain, sadness, and regret flooded through the air. "None of your damn business," Edward said, bitingly. With that, he turned on his heels and angrily stomped away. He faintly heard his brother's cries of "wait up." He just had to get away from her. She made him sick to his stomach. The mere sight of her repulses him. Naruto watched sadly as her brother walked away from her. She saw the two bodyguards giving her minor looks of pity before following after them, but she was hardly paying any attention to them. Hell, she doesn't even know their names. All she could say was that her reunion with Ed and Al went better than she thought. Of course it was far from perfect, on the complete opposite side of a perfect, happy reunion, but a happy reunion wasn't really what she was expecting anyway. She just thought there would be shouting, more yelling, and wayward fists thrown here and there. She was more than prepared to let Edward get one free shot at her, even she could easily dodged it, if it would help placate his anger just a tiny bit. After all, Alphonse had been more or less forgiving towards her. Edward, on the other hand, was obviously not. Naruto smiled, wryly. Well, Ed was one to hold grudges, unlike Al. She glanced up at the clear, blue sky. She was prepared for the work that was ahead, but she was expecting nothing less. She's been through a lot. Sasuke's betrayal, the Akatsuki, the Fourth Great War. She didn't give up then, and there's no way she's giving up now. Or her name's not Naruto Uzumaki. Edward furiously stomped down the street. He could hear the sound of metal hitting the pavement, meaning his little brother was following him, accidentally bumping into pedestrians if his hurried cries of "I'm sorry" were any indication, but he paid it no mind. The nerve of her, the arrogance of her, showing up unannounced. As if she had any right. Who the hell does she think she is? Edward found an empty bench plopped down on it, posture slouched, arms crossed, and a deep scowl on his face. Alphonse sighed in relief when he saw his older brother finally stop to sit down and take a break from his aimless walking. He quietly took a seat next to him. Neither brother spoke, not knowing what to say. Their sister was back. After 10 long, agonizing years, she'd returned. A sister that left without reason, who had never made any contact with them, not so much as a single letter. Now, she came back just as mysteriously as she had left, and Ed and Al didn't know what to make of this. How were they supposed to interact with her? How would she react to the fact that one of her brothers has a metal right arm and left leg, and the other doesn't even have a body? What would she say? Should they tell her? Tell her that they committed the ultimate taboo known to alchemists? No, Edward thought, vehemently. He fisted his hands into his pant leg. She wasn't there for any of it. She doesn't know the suffering Al and I went through. The hell Al and I are still going through. She left us, she wasn't there for any of it. Alphonse glanced at his older in worry. Brother. Edward let out a deep sigh to calm his nerves, knowing he was worrying his little brother. You know, Al, this. He gestured to his arm. Doesn't change anything. I know, Al whispered, quietly, knowing what it meant. There was a moment of silence before Ed spoke again. I'm not forgiving her, he declared through clenched teeth. The suit of armor remained silent. Don't forget, Al, Naruto wasn't there. The elder Elric spoke as if to remind his younger brother that Naruto was not with them when they committed human transmutation. That she had left them. She created a hole in the family that never went away. Al contemplated his next words, knowing the wrong choice of words would set Ed off. He could understand Ed's anger and resentment. Hell, he had the same such sentiments, but he really missed his sister and was incredibly to see her alive and well after all these years. He wanted nothing more than to talk to her and reminisce about the past and what they'd both been up to for the past decade. Ed, she's family, Alphonse replied, tentatively, a few minutes. Edward pretended not to hear him, and he stood up from the bench. Al sighed. Where are you going? To the library, was the somewhat angry response he got. A week after, Ed and Al found out the awful truth. The deep-rooted, unfathomable, dark truth about the Philosopher's Stone. The one hope they had of returning their bodies back to normal. The Philosopher's Stone needed the sacrifice of thousands of human lives. There was no way Edward and Alphonse would be able to sacrifice countless people's lives just so they could return to normal. Yet incredibly morally wrong, and this was their problem, no one else's. They made a vow not to get others too involved in their affairs. Edward, disheartened, reached his hand towards the ceiling fan. You know, I think this is God's way of mocking us. We made a mistake as little kids and he still has a grudge against us. They heard a knock on the door. Ed, Al, are you in there? Come on out. I brought dinner. They immediately recognized the voice of their older sister. Edward glared at the door as if he wanted to burn a hole through it. Alphonse glanced between the door and his brother, unsurely, as if contemplating whether to open it or not. What do we do, brother? Al asked. Ed scoffed, turning away from the door. Just ignore her. The knocking became louder. Ed, Al, open up. Damn it, the Full Metal Alchemist shouted at the door. This has nothing to do with a stupid, washout hag like you. Al gasped, horrified. Brother, you shouldn't say that about sister. Edward snorted, but before he could respond, the door suddenly flew over their heads, startling the two boys. Ed and Al glanced over, only to be incredibly terrified as they were greeted by a creature they would only see in their worst nightmares. Her long, blonde hair was whooshing wildly around her, her blue eyes glowed with murderous intent, her lips were stretched into a sadistic smirk, and there was a violently ominous aura hovering around her. Edward and Alphonse haven't been this terrified since training with their teacher. They have to wonder if all women are this scary. Who the fuck do you think you're talking to, Edward? Naruto growled out, daring Ed to answer, promising a whole world of pain if he answers wrong. Nothing, Alphonse quickly and frantically answered for his older brother. He didn't mean it, sister. We've been under a lot of stress lately. You know how Ed gets when things don't go easy for him. He let out a nervous laugh. Naruto thought this over as her blue eyes scanned the both of them. She sighed, softly, letting her anger and rage dissipated. Well, here's your dinner. She handed the lunchbox over to Alphonse. I heard you guys haven't eaten in days. That's not good. She and Al went over to the dining table to set the food she made down. Ed, come eat, Naruto beckoned him. Edward glared at her for a bit, getting ready to tell her off until his stomach grumbled at the sight of chicken and rice that set out on the table. Unable to ignore his growing hunger, especially when there was food laid out before him, mocking him, he grumpily stalked towards the table. Who's going to fix the door? He questioned, eyeing the broken door near the kitchen. You are, Ed. You can just fix it with alchemy, Naruto answered, dismissively. Oh, how very convenient for you, the blonde boy said, sarcastically. Dinner was awkwardly quiet for the three siblings. Naruto tried to make small talk to cut the tension, but only Alphonse was willing to communicate with her. Edward was trying his best to ignore her, already making up his mind to having as little to do with her as possible. That made the eldest sibling a little sad, but she wasn't one to give up so easily. Although, through her observations, she noticed something very important during dinner and decided to voice it. Why aren't you eating, Al? Ed and Al immediately went pale, fumbling for a proper excuse. I am just no hungry, sister. Alphonse answered, hurriedly. I already ate before. Naruto let out a disappointed sigh. Please don't lie to me, Alphonse. I know that's impossible since you don't have a body, she stated, matter-of-factly. Her younger brothers instantly went slack-jawed. Not only because she already Al's condition, but the nonchalantly way she said it as if it was no big deal. How did you know? Al asked, hesitantly. Ed was still too stunned to say anything. By the sound of your footsteps and your voice, she answered, simply. It's way too hollow. And besides, what do you think the first thing I did when I came back? I went by our house, only to see burned down to a crisp. She let out a deep breath, waiting for what to happen after she spoke the next few words. I know that you guys performed human transmutation. Alphonse let out a loud, horrified gasp and Edward furiously slammed his hands on the table, Naruto distinctively hearing the sound of metal clanging against the surface. What right do you have to be snooping around? Edward shouted at her, his face contorted into one of pure anger. I have the right to know why my old home is no longer there, Naruto replied, calmly. As the eldest sibling with more experience than her two brothers combined in these types of situations, it wouldn't do her any good to lose her temper. She had reasoned with herself earlier to try to approach her little brothers in a calm and mature manner, given that she had more worldwide experience than the both of them. Compared to her, they were still just children, after all. Sister, you don't seem to be that disappointed or mad at us, Al observed. Naruto shrugged her shoulders. Honestly, I'm a little disappointed, but meh. You guys could have turned out a lot worse. I mean, you guys could have become mad scientists obsessed with immortality and performing creepy human experimentations. Psychopaths obsessed with revenge. Or developed a god complex, trying to take over the world. Maybe even create a super weapon and start an international war. Edward and Alphonse just started at her dumbfounded and confused at the list off all the worst possible outcomes she could think of. What they didn't know was the fact that she was listing off all the villains she's met while I was gone. So, basically, you thought we would turn into a couple of criminals and murderers, Ed confirmed with a twitch of his eyebrow. Naruto nodded her head. I was ready to beat some sense into you guys, if that happened. Edward grinded his teeth together. Well, none of it would have happened if you haven't abandoned us. He shot out, furiously, all deep-seated bitterness he had for her, lashing out all at once. Where have you been all this time? Why did you leave? Naruto stared at her younger brother, sadly for a second, noting the pain hidden underneath his angered, golden eyes. I'm sorry. I know that I'm partly to blame for the way things turned out. She glanced over to Ed, calmly as if staring at a child throwing a temper tantrum. But like said before, Edward, nothing I'd say would change the past. We are all going to have to learn to just deal with it. Ed let out a forced, uneasy laugh. Deal with it, you say. That's easy for you to say. You have no idea of the suffering Al and I went through. What you're saying sounds like an excuse, Edward, Naruto retorted, cutting him off, her cerulean blue eyes piercing through him. Are you really trying to blame me for your actions? I admit that it was my fault that you guys had to go through such desperate times at such a young age, but take some responsibility for your actions, Ed, instead of trying to pin the blame on others. Naruto let out an exasperated breath. Mistakes aren't made so that a person would grow arrogant and conceited because of it. Mistakes are made to teach humility and appreciation for life, to help mature a person to learn from the past and to pass on their experiences to the next generation. Edward, it's clear to me that you haven't learned anything from your mistakes. In fact, just listening to you now, it seems that you have grown even more arrogant and self-absorbed because of it, and that's where I'm very disappointed. She stood up from the table, already finished with her meal. Until you learn that, there's no way I could tell you guys anything. Sister, Alphonse spoke, sadly, feeling her disappointment weighing down on him. The blonde woman stopped by the torn-down doorway. If the path you walk is no longer available, then find another path. If you can't find any, then just create your own. Use your own powers and knowledge to create a path for you to walk across, even if you have to create it out of nothing. She stayed silent for a second, a small smile tugging at her lips. I'm not worried at all. You guys will get your bodies back. I do believe in you. The blonde Uzumaki walked out the door, not waiting to see the reactions of the effect her words had on her two naive, idiotic brothers. Right now, she had other matters to attend to. When she was using Sage Jutsu to locate her brothers, she noticed various amount of ominous presence around the city, most notably coming from underneath it. She figured it was time to check out what was hiding underground. If things gets out of hand, maybe she would contact Kakashi-sensei to extend her stay. After all, she didn't want harm to come to Edward and Alphonse. She would absolutely make sure that all threats were eradicated for the brothers' safety. That's her job as the eldest sibling. Hospital Willies. Sitting meditatively on the roof, Naruto began drawing in nature energy. It was completely dark out, only the street lamps and the crescent moon served as light sources, so she was pretty hard to spot when one wasn't looking for her. Her objective was fairly simple. Find the source of that ominous presence, beat the hell out of it, and keep it from potentially harming her dear, little brothers. Quite simple, really. The only catch was trying not to draw attention to herself. She didn't want civilians or the police raiding the area and thus getting in her way. Plus, the fact she did not want her brothers finding out that she's a trained kunoichi in the art of assassination, infiltration, and espionage. That would involve explaining her past, and the blonde woman was not ready to hit that road with her two innocent brothers, who haven't seen as much blood and death as she had. This was more of a reconnaissance self-assigned mission than anything else. If it doesn't look like she'd be able to silently defeat the mysterious entity, the Uzumaki woman would get out of there as quickly as possible and contact Kakashi-sensei, so that she could stay long enough to deal with the problem. Naruto smirked when she felt herself entering sage mode. You know, it would have been much easier if you just went into tailed beast mode, Kurama spoke out. I can't do that, Kurama, Naruto argued. The glow and transformation would attract too much attention. With their brief conversation coming to an end, the female Uzumaki raced off to the source of the evil aura. Getting close towards the sewers of Central was fairly easy. She was expecting to be ambushed or something for getting too close to this creature's territory. However, no one made any attempts to attack her. At least, not yet. Naruko's questions and concerns were answered when, not even a few feet into the entrance of Central's underground pathway, she was immediately attacked by shadowy tendrils. She immediately jumped out of the way. Yeah, I knew something fishy was going on, she grinned to herself. The dark, deadly spears made another attempt to skewer her once again. In response, the blonde woman quickly pulled out a kunai from her pouch and sliced through a few of the tentacles. Naruko, behind you, Kurama quickly warned his host. Naruko twisted her body around to grab at one of the tentacles that were trying to pierce her from behind. What interesting, little human you are. A sinister voice resonated throughout the area. She couldn't tell whether the monster sounded intrigued or annoyed that its attempts to kill her were failing. It was apparent that it actually never met a human that could fight back. Its attacks began even more ferocious and vicious as it tried spearing in different areas. It was apparent that the creature was very adamant about not letting her venture any further. It was funny. As the battle raged on, Naruko noticed that the monster used shadows to attack. It was similar to the Nara clan's shadow possession jutsu, however, while their jutsu were usually used to immobilize enemies, this monster's attacks were clearly meant to be used offensively and for assassinations. And in this narrow alleyway, it was hard for blonde Uzumaki to counterattack. The monster definitely had the advantage here. She dodged another strike by backflipping against the wall. Maybe she should make a retreat before someone starts to hear all the ruckus the battle is making and start to rush over to investigate. Don't want her cover to be blown. Yet, got you. She heard the monster squeal in cruel delight as a couple of tentacle pierced through her midsection. She coughed out a bit of blood before a sly smirk graced her lips. In an instant, her body was replaced with that of a steel pole. From up on the roof, Naruko could hear the creature's yells of shock, dismay, and frustration. She bet it has never seen a substitution jutsu before. Well, as much as she wanted to stick around, there was no use staying if she didn't know where the creature's true form lay. It was awfully determined not to let her go any further, nor to see what it really looks like. Besides, she needed to get her rest. Been kind of a long day. Seeing her brothers again mentally exhausted her, but in a good way. At least, two things were confirmed for the female Uzumaki. One, there were monsters lurking about, dangers that were threat to her precious little brothers. And that too, they seem to be able to know quite a bit about how humans interact, basing on how smug the tentacle creature was when it thought she was just a normal human woman. Meaning that the people of Amstress are either oblivious to them, or that they blend in so well with humans, which means they are monsters in human-shaped form. There are many possibilities lurking around in Naruko's head. However, if it really was the latter, and they have made contact with humans and are free to be viciously hostile and to kill humans without a second thought while roaming the streets without a care in the world, then this may be a bigger problem than she expected. It would be obvious that somebody or some people were in league with these monsters. In other words, in the worst-case scenario, there may very well be a conspiracy going on. Naruko let out an irritated sigh as she slumped against the wall of empty apartment buildings she sneak in. Fucking more trouble. And all she wanted to do was to relax and spend time with Ed and Al for the next month. She didn't know her vacation would actually turn into a fucking mission. Guess she'll contact Kakashi-sensei to extend her stay indefinitely until her new mission is cleared. At least on the bright side, that means Naruko would get spend more time with Edward and Alphonse. So, it wasn't a total loss. She let out a breathless sigh. But how long could she keep her secret from them? Ed was in the hospital. Ed was in the hospital. Ed was in the fucking hospital. Of all the, just what the fuck happened in one night? Just wait until she gets her hands on those two idiot brothers of her. What reckless stunt did those morons pull this time? Naruko angrily raced down the hall towards her brother's room, which she got from the receptionist. She twisted around patients and swiveled across corners, being as agile as a cat. When she spotted Edward's bodyguards, she knew she was in the right room. Out of politeness, the blonde Uzumaki gave a short bow towards them. They gave her awkward looks and hand gestures in return. Naruko couldn't blame them for feeling slightly nervous and uneasy, not after having a front row seat to witness their family drama. They probably didn't know how to talk to her, or if they should be talking to her in the first place. The blonde woman then heard a man inside the room make a comment about Edward dating Winry. She had to hold back a snort when her little brother indignantly denied being attracted to his mechanic. Man, she couldn't miss an opportunity like this. Seeing Edward all flustered and embarrassed, she just got to make him even more flustered. So she did the only thing she could think of. Run in the room and proclaim something so embarrassing to young boys who are in the midst of puberty. Edward, Naruko's voice held a serious and stern tone, heavily contrasting the giddiness and impishness she was feeling inside. Make sure to use protection. She was always known to be as mischievous as a fox. Seeing Ed comically collapse and turn as white as a ghost was pure gold. Although, seeing Winry's beat red face made her feel a little guilty. Sorry, Winry. Naruko mentally promised to make it up to her. She could hear the two guards outside let out flabbergasted gasps. Score. She was officially successful in traumatizing Ed for life. That what he gets for worrying her. The best pranks are always executed when there are witnesses around to see it unfold. Slowly recovering from his mortifying trauma he'd probably never leave down, Edward turned his golden gaze towards his sister as his eyes darkened. "What are you doing here?" he spat out, bitterly. Naruko's mirthful smile turned into an angry frown. She marched up to her younger brother and gave him a headbutt he'd be feeling for weeks. "Oh," Ed screeched in pain, holding his head. "What was that for?" "That's for worrying me, you moron," Naruko yelled, angrily. She kneeled down so that she was at eye level. "Look, Ed, I know that you don't trust me. I know that I hurt you, hurt the family. I know that I can't say sorry and expect everything to return to how it used to be when we were kids. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to try. Like it or not, I'm sticking around, so you better get used to it, Databeo." She held Ed's face in her hands, which caused him to glower at her. "After all, you're my precious, baby brother," she cooed, pulling Ed into a tight hug, practically crushing him. "You are just so precious." The blonde Uzumaki started jumping and spinning him around like an eccentric mother. Ed, on the hand, felt nauseated as the world was spinning so fast he hardly make out any color or shape. He could feel his wounds reopening. He was dreading the thought of his sister turning into another Hughes. Naruko," Winry called out to the overexcited, older blonde. "I think you should put Ed down now." Cerulean eyes blinked in confusion. "Why?" "Because he's turning green." At the mechanic's statement, Naruko glanced down at her younger brother to see that she was right. Ed did look like he was the verge of vomiting. She quickly laid Edward back down on his bed while apologizing profusely. "By the way," Naruko spoke, glancing around the room. "Where is Al?" "I don't know," Winry answered, looking slightly worried. "I haven't seen him." Naruko was starting to get concerned. "I'm going to go look for him." She raced out the room before she could hear anyone protest against her. It wasn't long before Naruko found her youngest brother sulking in a dark corner a few blocks away from Edward's room. "Al," she called out, hesitantly. She doesn't know what caused her brother to become so sad after he was overcome with anxiety and joy after seeing her the other day. What happened in one night that caused Ed to be hospitalized and Al to become so depressed? It hurts her because she wasn't there to protect her baby brothers. Alphonse lifted his helmet head slightly when he felt the seat next to him shift a bit. "Oh, hey, sister," he let out a half-hearted greeting when he noticed it was Naruko taking up the seat next to his. Naruko frowned. Something was really bothering Al. "Sup, Al, I just came visiting Ed." Al threw her a questioning gaze. "How did you know Ed would be here?" "People lie to talk." "A lot," she replied, vaguely. "Anyway, I went over, gave Ed a smacking and a lecture, and that hug he owes me, Databeo. Let's just say, by the end of it, he would be seeing blue and green for a while." Alphonse gave out a small laugh, which caused Naruko to frown even more. He was practically expected it to sound lighthearted, but it just came out hesitant and forced. They stayed there for an uneasy moment of silence. "You know," the blonde Uzumaki started. "If something bothering you, Al, I'm always here to listen." "No, that's okay, sister. I'm fine," he smiled, which she immediately knew was fake. Naruko sighed and stood up from her seat. She knew neither her brothers would tell her anything. They were so stubborn, such stubborn boys. She could partially consider the fact that they thought whatever they were hiding were much too dangerous for her to know. She gave her youngest brother one last hug. "Just try to stay safe, okay? Don't forget I'm always going to be here for you as well as Edward and Winry." She sent him one last smile before turning away and leaving. "Naruko," a gentle, motherly voice called out. "Come on out. It's time for dinner." A shy, little girl about the age of 4 poked her head out from behind the door, blue eyes wide with uncertainty. "Oh, okay," Naruko spoke, her voice filled with apprehension. She took a tentative step forward, surveying her surroundings as if waiting for someone to jump at her or to yell at her to get out. "What are you doing standing there, sweetheart?" Naruko glanced up, her blonde pigtails bouncing behind her as the woman's brown hair went to pick her up. The little girl flinched slightly when she felt a pair of hands pick her up. Next thing she knew was that she was gently plopped her down on the chair. She offered the shy girl a gentle smile before walking away to get her food. Naruko peeked through her bangs to see the blonde man staring at her. When they made eye contact, she quickly averted her eyes. Ed was busy finding the table fascinating. The blonde young girl could feel her nervousness and anxiety taking a hold of his trepidation of sweat starting to roll down the back of her neck. Finally, what felt like hours, but was actually only minutes, a plate of steamy roasted chicken and mashed potatoes was set before her. Naruko blinked in bewilderment. Where were the scraps of bread crust, the banana peels, or the leftover vegetables the other kids didn't want to eat? This meal was too delicious, too exquisite. This couldn't be right. It was probably a mistake. Yeah, that's what it was. Maybe Mrs. Elric had made a mistake and had meant the meal for somebody else. Naruko had half the mind to tell the woman about her blunder, but another part of her wanted to hurry and eat the food before she realized her mistake. "Naruko." The young girl almost jumped when her name was called. She gazed up to see the woman's green eyes gazing at with concern. "What's wrong, sweetheart? You don't like it?" Naruko shook her head, afraid if she said anything, she might set the nice lady off. She brought her attention back to her food, staring at it with apprehension. She could still remember the days at the orphanage where she would sit in a corner away from the other kids during mealtime. With great uncertainty, she picked up the fork. She tenderly cut out a piece of chicken and popped it in her mouth. She instantly felt the delicious texture of the chicken melt in her mouth. It was so good, just so good. Naruto, what's wrong, sweetie? Trisha asked, her tone laced with panic and worry. She went towards the little girl, picking her up. Honey, why are you crying? She was crying. Naruto didn't notice the sprays of tears splashing across her face. She didn't realize she was crying. All she thought about was how good the food was. It's so good. It's so good. She decided to tearfully voice that thought to the nice lady, her adoptive mother, who had given her her first real meal, and not just leftover scraps. Trisha smiled kindly, hugging the crying girl. There, she whispered, soothingly, petting the blonde girl's head in a relaxing and motherly way. It was the first time Naruto experienced what a family meal was. Naruto was listening in on the conversation Edward and Alphonse were having with their military friends. She knew it wasn't right to spy, but damn it, she's going to do it anyway. She's not a kunoichi for nothing. Now, what were her dear little brothers hiding from her? The blonde kunoichi tuned into the conversation. She heard words like Ouroboros tattoo, Lab 5, Philosopher's Stone, Sacrifice, and Homunculi. She made sure to keep mental checklist of all the important factors. She was guessing that this shadowy tentacle monster she encountered yesterday was one of these homunculi creatures. Naruto bit the inside to keep her anger in check. And these homunculi consider her brothers as sacrifices. It took all her willpower not to scream and create a hole in the ceiling, which is where she was residing. More precisely, in the air vent. She knew her big sister instinct was kicking in as she just wanted to kidnap Ed and Al and leave the country. Take them to Konoha where they would be safe, guarded, and protected until she annihilates every last homunculi. She silently removed the vent that was blocked and jumped down, landing behind her little brothers without uttering a single noise. Nobody noticed she was now literally in the room, listening them discuss on how to deal with the fifth lab problem. Not even the guy with glasses or the tall mustached guy detected her, too engrossed in strategizing their next move. The blonde Uzumaki felt a mixture of pride and disappointment coil inside. Pride in her skills as a kunoichi. Man, sneaking was really easy. All those espionage and infiltration missions do come in handy. Even though she's more of Tai who would scream first, ask questions later, she could extremely sneaky if she wanted. Disappointment in regards to the people in front of her. If she was a real assassin, she could take them all out in an instant without them noticing what happened. They shouldn't leave their backs open and unguarded. And they call themselves professionals in the military. She decided to finally make her presence known after 15 minutes of listening in. Naruto leaned over Ed's shoulder to get a look at some sort of crude drawing. It looks like a drawing of a 5-year-old. Whoever drew those does not have any artistic talent. What's this? Some kind of strategy meeting? Naruto questioned with a raised brow. As expected, the men around let out startled yelps as they turned to face her with eyes wide with shock and bewilderment. Sister. Alphonse was the first to speak, his voice trembling so much with dumbfoundment that, if he had his real body, his heart would instantly burst. No doubt the others felt the same way. Where on earth did you come from? Naruto gave him a playfully confused look. I've been standing here for 15 minutes. After getting over his initial shock, Edward glared at her, gold eyes full of skepticism. There was no way she was standing there for 15 minutes without any of them discovering an extra person in the room. Before Ed could proclaim the falsehood of Naruto's statement, the door gently burst open. For King Bradley. Everybody, except Naruto, exclaimed, flabbergasted when a man in his late 60s wearing an eye patch entered the room. Hello, Fullmetal, the man greeted with a disgustingly fake smile that made the blonde woman's skin itch. I heard that you were in the hospital, so I thought a nice melon might cheer you up. Even without Kurama's chakra and enhanced ability to sense negative emotions, she could tell that the man's voice was full of mockery, malice, and venom, eyeing her brother as a mere tool and not a person. So, this was the leader of Aimstress. VFFT. From what she could tell, he was nothing more than a glorified serial killer. How could people be blind to follow a man like him? He obviously couldn't care less if he sacrificed his own men, if it meant obtaining his goal. Just the thought of this guy being leader of the country absolutely pissed her off. It was spitting on the fact of what a true leader was supposed to be. A leader was supposed to be the pillar of support for their people, and wouldn't hesitate to give up their life if it meant protecting their loved ones and country, just like her father, the fourth Hokage. This man was the complete opposite of that, and it pissed the blonde kunoichi off so much that she could feel her blood boil and her teeth grinding so hard, she was afraid they would crack. And who might you be, miss? Naruto was snapped out of her musing to see the Fura greeting her with that infuriating fake smile of his. She relayed her options. There was no way she could attack the guy unprovoked, so she opted to just simply smile and greet him back. Oh, hi, the blonde Uzumaki greeted back. My name is Naruto Elric. She made a mental note to call herself Naruto Elric instead of Naruto Uzumaki since coming here. Don't want anyone looking too into her background or cause suspicion. What's your name, old man? A blonde eyebrow rose in confusion when she noticed everyone giving her looks of disbelief. What? The Fura let out a hearty laugh. You certainly are an interesting girl. Elric, are you by chance related to Fullmetal? The blonde woman resisted the urge to glare the revolting Aimstress leader. Behind that friendly exterior, she could tell he was plotting something. Why, yes, I'm their older sister. I, haven't been around much, she answered. She figured there was no point in hiding her relationship with Ed and Al. After all, they couldn't touch her, even if they wanted to. She's not an ordinary woman. So, what's an old geezer like you doing visiting my brother in the hospital? Naruto resisted the urge to smirk when she saw the man's eyebrow twitch. There was something sadistically satisfying about getting under this guy's skin. She let out a surprised yelp when she was instantly yanked back. Confused cerulean blue eyes glanced over to see Edward glowering at her, angrily, looking at her as if she has gone insane. Are you crazy, Naruto? He whispered, harshly in her ear. You can't talk to the Fuhrer like that. Do you want to get killed? She nodded, dumbly, resisting the urge to roll her eyes as she watched Alphonse apologize profusely on her behalf. She scoffed and crossed her arms. Whatever. She went over to the far side of the wall away from the military men. Edward gave his sister one last scolding glare before rejoining the other men. What was she thinking? Talking to the Fuhrer with such blatant disrespect. As if she was challenging him. Doesn't she know that the Fuhrer could revoke his state alchemist license? 10 minutes of hearing them discuss the collapse of Lab 5, and Naruto was deathly bored. I've got spy network working for us, King Bradley informed them. But these damn people always seem to be one step ahead of us. Blue eyes narrowed in suspicion. Spy. Does he mean that shadowy monster she encountered the other day? The blonde Kunoichi wasn't an idiot. The so-called leader of Aimstress was giving off the same bloodthirsty aura as that homunculus. Trust no one. And when the time comes, I expect you to fight by my side. Okay, it was time she stepped up and called this guy out on his bullshit. She doesn't trust that could potentially endanger her younger brothers, especially not this man. This glorified mass murderer. We'll keep that in mind. So, are you done with all your lies? Everyone turned wide-eyed at a smirking Naruto. Edward was glaring at her, signaling her to keep quiet while Alphonse was looking at the Fuhrer, frighteningly, probably hoping she didn't offend him in any way. Lies? The Fuhrer questioned, trying to give off that sickeningly insincere smile of his. I assure you, Ms. Elric, everything I tell you is the complete truth. You are lying right now, she bit back, smoothly. When you talk, you use empty words. Tell me, have you been rehearsing that line over and over to yourself? She questioned with absolute mockery. When you said to fight by your side, you really meant these mindless fools don't know that they are being used? Am I wrong? Naruto took note of the Fuhrer's twitching hand. She blatantly spoke out that she noticed that. Oh, your hand's twitching. Are you itching to grab your sword? Are you so angry that you would kill me out of spite? She let out a laugh full of mockery, not caring if others looked at her with dumbfoundment or disbelief, wondering she was truly insane. The great Fuhrer King Bradley killing an innocent girl just because he was having a temper tantrum. My, I wonder how would that affect your image? The image that the Fuhrer is nothing more than temper tantrum throwing mass murderer. Naruto, shut up. Edward hissed at her, scathingly. You really should listen to your brother, young lady, the Fuhrer spoke, but she could clearly hear the underlining fury in his tone. The blonde Uzumaki didn't know why she was enjoying getting this old geezer riled up. Maybe it was the fact that she was viciously attacked by that homunculus creature last night, and she was looking for some way to blow off steam. Or maybe she was pissed that her vacation was kind of ruined. Or maybe it was some sort of sadistic pleasure at seeing the Fuhrer squirm under her accusations because, deep down, he knows she's right. Not to mention that he gives off the same type of presence as that tentacle monster. Besides, the fact that he considers himself someone to be feared, someone who is above her, is utterly laughable. She has faced guys 10 times more, no 100 times more threatening than this bastard. Madara Uchiha and Kaguya Otsutsuki are prime examples. Hell, even Orochimaru is more a threat this old man. Naruto rose her hands up in mock surrender. Okay, I'm sorry. She threw her hands down, dramatically. So, about your so-called spy network. Are you talking about the person watching us from the shadows? She let out a dramatic, jabbing her thumb towards the window. Or the one standing behind the window. The blonde woman let out a faint, sadistic smirk when she saw King Bradley's visible eye narrow and a breathless gasp coming from outside. The spy. Pathetic. They really should train to hide their presence better. She could practically feel the malice coming off in waves. The silence was tension and deadly for the other occupants in the room. They could feel room turning 50 degrees colder. It was completely unbearable. The atmosphere was so tense a knife could cut it. Is King Bradley here? They tensed up when someone was calling the Fuhrer's name. Damn, bodyguard. Always thinks he's my shadow, the Fuhrer hissed, perhaps more viciously than he imagined when she saw that snot-nosed woman giving him another victorious smirk. Bradley headed towards the window, not before giving Naruto a murderous glare. Come to my office, Ms. Elric, he commanded, leaving no room for argument. I'd like to have a little chat. That nonchalant shrug she gave him infuriated him even more. Oh, how wished he could silence her right then and there. Put the useless trash out of his misery. But alas, he had work to do. He could always finish off the arrogant broad any time he wished. It would be that hard to hide the body and to pin the blame on someone else. So, he climbed out the window and leisurely walked away, leaving everybody, except Naruto, once again in a state of shock and disbelief. Winry had such uncanny timing because as soon as the Fuhrer was gone, she burst through the door. Although, the sight was greeted with was not something she was expecting. Naruto was lazily leaning against the wall with a pleased smirk on her face. Edward was murderously glaring at her, looking as if he wanted to strangle her. Alphonse looked like he was about to have a heart attack, and Hughes and Armstrong were completely dumbstruck. What happened? Winry asked, her curiosity getting the better of her. Edward gave his stupid sister one last glare before turning his attention towards Winry. Nothing, Winry, he replied, although he couldn't keep the anger out of his tone. Did you get the tickets? Yep, sure did. The blonde mechanic happily chirped, although she didn't tell him about the extra one she got for his sister. Naruto, what the hell are you doing here? Naruto pouted innocently at her baby brother. I didn't tell you. I'm coming with you, Databeo. Well, you're not coming. Edward all but screamed at her. His older sister tapped her finger against her chin. Well, that's too bad because Winry already bought me a ticket, she exclaimed, happily, holding up the tiny piece of paper. Winry, Ed sputtered, turning around to give his mechanic a look of utter betrayal. Oh, how exciting, Alphonse cried out with joy. Sister, our first trip together. Winry sighed at the two arguing siblings, already feeling a headache coming on. But she had to agree with Al. It was nice to have Naruto here with them again. First kiss. Erg, can you believe the nerve of that woman? King Bradley leisurely walked back to his office, hands clasped behind his back with a transformed Envy angrily stalking next to him, ranting about Naruto's disrespect and mockery. How could let a stupid human talk down to you like that, Wrath? Envy snarled. Wrath opened the door to his office and Envy followed him in, practically slamming the door shut behind him. I swear, when I see her, I'm going to slaughter her. How dare a filthy human like her talk down to us homunculi? So you guys really are homunculi? Envy nearly jumped out of his skin at the unexpected feminine voice in the room. Wrath was better than his brother at hiding his surprise, but his body tensed up slightly. That infuriating woman was there, perched nonchalantly on the open window sill. The way she sat there, so bored and uninterested, irritated Envy to no end. How did you get inside my office, Ms. Elric? Bradley asked, calmly assessing the blonde woman. He was just itching to slice the woman in half. The female Uzumaki offered a sly grin. That's a trade secret, old man. Envy could already feel his blood boiling at this arrogant human's cold dismissal. He watched with dark, narrowed as the woman egged herself off the window, taking a few unhurriedly paces to stand in front of Wrath, casually crossing arms her chest. That look of boredom and indifference on her face was really pissing him off. What is that you want? Wrath asked, suspiciously, his visible eye narrowing at the blonde Kunoichi. Naruto let out a nonchalant roll of her shoulders. Nothing, really. Aren't you the one who called me into your office? King Bradley hissed under his breath. He could begrudgingly admit that the woman got him there. However, she was undeniably stupid to show up alone and unarmed. Yes, I did, he answered, subtly signaling towards Envy. Recognizing Wrath's sign, Envy's lips graced into a cruel smirk, his dark purple eyes eyeing the female Uzumaki with immense malice. This was too perfect. Now that Wrath's got her attention, he could easily sneak behind her and snap her neck. He watched the exchange between Wrath and the female human, carefully keeping an eye on her. He crept as quickly as a mouse, making sure not to make even a sound. This was too easy. Humans are such pathetic, vulnerable creatures. You should really think about upgrading your security. If you do, she let out a startled yelp mid-sentence as she was grabbed from behind. What was that about buffing up security? Envy gleefully threw the question right back at her. The look of utter surprise on her face was absolutely delicious. His grip on her tightened to an uncomfortable degree. It's useless to struggle, Envy spoke, obviously enjoying tormenting the poor Kunoichi. He transformed into a blade and held it dangerously close to her neck, positioning it so he would be able to slit her throat at a moment's notice. Much to his irritation, the blonde woman didn't seem the least bit worried for her life. So, you guys are monsters in human disguise, she said, more a statement than a question. What was with this human? Why wasn't she scared? He practically had a blade just inches away from her neck. Shouldn't she be panicking, screaming for help? Or so terrified she'd be begging for her life? Naruto craned her neck to take a glance at her capture. He didn't look like anyone special. In fact, he was so ordinary that his only characteristics he had, besides being able to transform limbs, was that he was extraordinary ordinary. That dumbfounded look on his face was just ridiculous. Hey, you have a hostage? Or you just stand there like an idiot? Naruto questioned with an innocent tilt of her head. Envy's teeth gritted at the woman's sarcasm. She was obviously making fun of him. Why you? You are the woman that Pride spoke about. King Bradley spoke, cutting Envy off. Pride. A flashback of her fight with that tentacle monster flashed before her eyes. That's the shadow creature's name then? Huh. She smirked. Thanks, I'll remember that. I suggest you watch your mouth, human, Envy hissed, drawing his bladed arm closer to her neck, breaking skin and drawing out blood. You don't want me to suffer that pretty, little head of yours, do you? You're not killing the sister of a state alchemist, are you? Naruto inquired, mockingly. We won't kill Fullmetal or his brother, the Fuhrer responded, evenly. We need them both alive. However, he narrowed his eyes at the blonde woman, giving her a look full of malicious intent. There's nothing we need you for. As if on cue, Envy sliced his bladed arm through the woman's head, watching with sadistic glee as her head separated from her body. Unfortunately for him, instead of the usual splash of blood he was expecting to see spraying from her neck, there was a poof sound, followed by a cloud of smoke to reveal a simple log split in two. What the? Envy practically screamed in flabbergasted and alarmed. Wrath was just as astonished as his brother was. He's been watching her with his ultimate eye. When did she have time to replace herself with a log? No, how could she replace herself when Envy was holding her hostage? Wow, that's the second time I had to use a substitution jutsu. Both homunculi tensed and craned their body around to see that irritating blonde woman leaning against the bookshelf. You homunculi are easy to fool, Naruto chuckled. She leaned off the shelf and placed one hand on her hip in playfully wicked manner. What was that about killing me? She laughed mockingly at them. Don't make me laugh. You know how arrogant you sound. Don't overestimate your own abilities without realizing the depths of my own. I could take you guys both out without even breaking a sweat. You're lucky that I won't. At least, not yet. I'm not in that kind of mood right. Besides, this room is too crowded and there's too many people in this building. Envy gritted his teeth, completely enraged at this human's constant mockery of them. Shut up, you damn human. Who the hell do you think you are to talk down on us like that? Naruto simply gave him a wry smile. Who, me? Oh, I'm no one special really. She casually stuffed her hands in her pockets. I don't like to flaunt myself. I'm not that type of woman. I only came here just to warn you. Blue eyes turned icy cold and both homunculi felt fear for the first time as a wave of killing intent washed over them. It felt like someone was holding a knife over their neck as they stood, frozen in place. I've got connections. I'm very important to a lot of people. I'll just simply cut to the chase instead of rambling on. If I were to die, she smirked cruelly. Let's just say that you would have about half of the world wanting all you homunculi, or whatever the hell you call yourselves, dead. The blonde Kunoichi wasn't bluffing when she said this. It was the cold truth. She expected if something happened to her, no doubt Kakashi-sensei would send some people from Konoha to investigate. Probably people like Sakura and Shikamaru and maybe Sasuke, if he took time off from his self-redemption journey. Not mention she's close friends with Gaara, so no doubt he'd send some Saiyan shinobi if Kakashi-sensei asked him to. Speaking of that, she's friends with Killer Bee, the Raikage's brother, so maybe even he might pitch in. She glared viciously. If you touch one hair on my brother's head again, I'll kill you all. She spoke with such iciness in her voice it sent shivers down in both Envy's and Wrath's spine. They never met a human who could such fear into their beings. Consider that a warning. We got to go. With a wave of her hand, she disappeared into a puff of smoke. After their initial fright and shock dissipated, Envy growled, murderously, completely infuriating, his blood boiling. That bitch. He slammed his fist through the table, shattering it. Naruto slowly opened her cerulean blue eyes from her short nap when a flash of her shadow clone's memories zipped past her mind. A sweet-smelling scent wafted into her nose. What's that smell? She asked, almost drooling at the delectable scent. She stretched her tired limbs a bit. Her blue eyes glanced over at the apple pie laid out on Winry's lap. Glad to see you're awake, sister, Alphonse spoke, noticing his sister stirring from her sleep. How was your nap? Naruto smiled at her brother, ignoring the contemptive way Edward was looking at her. It was good. Here's a slice of apple pie, Winry said, happily setting a piece of the pie on plate and handing it to the older blonde with a fork. Thanks, Winry, Naruto cried out with gratitude, taking a huge chunk of the humble pie. She hummed in delight at the delicious flavor. Whoever made this did an outstanding. One of the best pies I ever tasted, Databeo. The blonde mechanic giggled. I'd be sure to tell Gracia you enjoyed her pie, Naruto, once I get back to Central. Naruto nodded her, cheerfully. Please do. Oh, and ask her make me another one. There's no need for that, Naruto, I could bake the pie for you, Winry assured. Cerulean blue eyes sparkled with joy. Really? Awesome. Databeo. Winry smiled at the older woman's joyful glee then turned her attention towards Edward. Why are you guys going to Dublif? She asked, curiously. What do you plan to find there? Well, we are planning to meet our teacher, Edward replied. Naruto raised an eyebrow at that. Teacher? Yeah, our alchemist teacher, Alphonse responded this time. She taught us everything we know about fighting and alchemy, Ed added. Wait, so, you guys are only going to fight? Winry yelled, indignantly. Not just to fight. Ed yelled back. We are also going to ask her about the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone, Naruto thought, intrigued. She taught us everything we know about alchemy, but she never mentioned the Philosopher's Stone, Ed continued. What's your teacher like, Ed? Winry asked, interested. Her question caused both Ed and Al to pale considerably. Time to say our prayers, Al, Ed moaned, miserably. I wish I had a girlfriend before I died, Al whimpered. Naruto hummed, tilting her head in curiosity. You've never had a girlfriend before, Al? She asked, strangely interested in her brother's love life or lack of. A sly smile formed on her lips. That means you have never been kissed. Why? Alphonse stuttered. You know, Naruto started making smooching sounds, causing Al to blush. She didn't a suit of armor could blush. Knock it off, Naruto. Edward snapped, angrily. Quit teasing, Al. Sorry, Al. The blonde Kunoichi apologized, sheepishly. She turned her mischievous blue eyes toward her other brother. How about you, Ed? Got a girlfriend you want your dear sister to meet? She watched with great amusement as Ed's face turned as red as a tomato. Teasing her brothers was such fun. Especially Edward. He's so easily flustered. So, you haven't kissed girl either, huh? Naruto grinned, playfully. Ed's face flushed a brighter shade of red. His sister sighed. And here I thought you and Winry would get together. So, you guys still haven't sealed the deal. It was Winry's turn to blush. Shut up, Naruto. Edward shouted, angered and flustered. Winry isn't my girlfriend. And what about you? Have you kissed anyone? Naruko instantly froze, wide-eyed. She never expected the question and teasing to backfire on her. Memories of her first kiss flashed before her eyes. Her first kiss ... with Sasuke. She turned her head away from their prying eyes, not to see her blushing face. She mumbled something inaudible under her breath. Hey, Edward yelled, exasperatedly. Don't turn your head away, Naruko. Huh, you haven't been kissed either. Naruko craned her head back towards her younger brother, a fire dancing in her cerulean blue eyes. Don't compare myself to you, little brother, she replied, feeling insulted. Unlike you, I have kissing experience. A sound of collective gasps resounded around. The blonde Uzumaki realized her slip-up and instantly covered her mouth, her cheeks taking on a red tint in embarrassment. Winry was the first to react, giggling in glee. Oh, Shikude, you got a boyfriend, Naruko? Naruko shook her head, frantically. He's not my boyfriend. We just a couple of times. It was all accidents. She hastily added on when she noticed the playfully sly looks she was getting, feeling even more flustered. Winry squealed with delight. Who is he? She was so interested in the boy who was Naruko's first kiss. And they have kissed a few times, according to her. The blonde Kunoichi blinked for a second, her mind going a million miles a minute. She let out a small smile. His name is Sasuke Uchiha, she spoke. There was a gentle fondness in her voice. Sasuke Uchiha, Edward inquired. Weird name, never heard of it. What's he like? Alphonse asked, curiously. Naruko smiled, happy that her brothers and friend were interested in her old teammate. Talking about Sasuke always made her feel somewhat giddy now that she could talk about him without feeling a cloud of agony and regret aching in her heart. She hummed and thought, well, let's see. Sasuke is what might call a cool genius. He's considered a child prodigy, but he's a bit of loner. We were classmates. He was the smartest person in class, always scoring the top of class. He was popular with the girls, too. So popular, in fact, that he had his own fan club. Edward, Alphonse, and Winry all listened with rapt attention. Girls always go for the mysterious, bad boy types. Sasuke never cared for his fan club. In fact, he found them to be extremely annoying and nothing but nuisances. He was arrogant and aloof, never wanting to socialize with other people. He was very prideful, so prideful that asking for help him always frustrated him in the beginning. What can I say? He's brutally honest, not really caring if what he's saying hurts someone's feelings or not. I remembered one time a girl asked him, she ended up brutally rejected, running off in tears. She paused for a second, letting the fond memories of their days in the academy and their eventual graduation and companionship during the formation of Team 7 flashed in her mind. Sasuke and I always used to hate each other. We never really gotten along. I never liked him. I thought he was an arrogant jerk, nothing but a stuck-up bastard. We always competed against one another. Neither of us could stand losing to the other. We were stubborn that way. Eventually, we learned to begrudgingly respect each other's strength. That respect turned into a genuine friendship. I learned that Sasuke may be a bastard, but he had a nice side, too. He's kind and thoughtful, even if he has a funny way of showing it. He has a rough exterior, but he's a good guy deep down. Wow, sounds like you really like this guy, sister, Hal observed. Naruko instantly jumped out of her seat in a panic. What? She gasped out, feeling flustered. Don't be ridiculous, Al. We are just friends, nothing more. She quietly sat back down, her lips turned downward into a small frown. And besides, our relationship. Just shut up for once. What the hell do you know about it? It's not like you ever had a family in the first place. You were on your own right from the beginning. What makes you think you know anything about it? Huh, I'm suffering now because I had those ties. How on earth could you possibly understand ... what it feels like to lose all that? If you attack Konoha, I will have to fight you. So save up your hatred and take it all on me. I'm the only one who could take it. It's the only thing I can do. I will shoulder your hatred and die with you. Complicated. The rest of them all blinked in confusion as Naruko turned her away, looking out towards the window, wanting to end the conversation before getting into details she'd rather not discuss, her right clenching her shirt where her heart laid where her Chidori-induced scar was. I figured you know why I called you back to Konoha. The young raven-haired man stared at his former teacher, merely raising an elegant brow. I heard that it was about Naruko. The laid-back Hokage leaned back against his chair. Why, yes, not long ago, I sent Naruko to a country called Amstress. Amstress? The raven-haired man inquired, testing the foreign word on the tip of his. It's a country far off to the east, past the land of lightning. It's across the ocean, so you have to get there by boat, the silver-haired man explained. Why is Naruko in this country? The black-haired man questioned. I sent her here for her vacation. She wanted to go there. Apparently, she has family. 2 younger brothers, to be more precise, the Hokage answered. That reply left the younger man confused. Family. Naruko had never told him of any siblings. Everyone, including himself, just assumed that she was an orphan. He didn't know what to think about her lying to him all these years. He felt kind of ... hurt. I know that you are skeptical. I was, too, at first. I went through the third Hokage files to find that it was really true. Naruto does have siblings living in Amstress. Adopted brothers to be more accurate. Apparently, Naruto was adopted by the Elric family at a young age, but returned here when it was time to begin her career as a shinobi. Seeing as most of questions were being confirmed, the dark-haired man replied with his follow-up question. Why do you want me to go over there to Amstress? That. The silver-haired Hokage leaned forward, his dark gray eyes sharp. Apparently, Naruto has run into a little trouble while vacationing. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a letter. That girl always seems to find trouble wherever she may be. He handed it over to the younger gentleman. The black-haired man held out his only arm and gracefully opened the letter, reading its content. His face contorted for a split second of one of amusement and exasperation before forming back to its usual aloof look. The letter was definitely from Naruto. The messy handwriting was a dead giveaway. She finds trouble even on her time off. I assume you already know what to do. The man silently nodded his head. Good. You are to head out to Amstress and help Naruto solve this issue. When do I leave? There's a boat that heads over there tomorrow morning, so leave then. The sooner, the better. The raven-haired young man nodded his head in affirmation once more and headed out the door of Hokage's office, knowing that his business with his former teacher was done. Good luck, Sasuke. Automail. Automail. The trio siblings watched as Winry gushed about Automail with varying degrees of exasperated expectancy. We should just leave Winry here in this town of Automail freaks and head over to Dublith, Edward said, irritable, impatient, tapping his foot against the pavement as the blonde mechanic went into another shop, gashing about the mechanics of Automail. That's the price you pay, Ed, to satisfy your girlfriend, Naruto teased. Edward's cheeks instantly flushed pink in embarrassment. Damn it, Naruto. Winry is not my girlfriend. Naruto innocently tilted her head, although she enjoyed teasing her little brother and making him all flustered. She should be. She patted his back roughly. She would make you a nice wife, she laughed, heartily. Well, what about you and this Sasuke guy? Ed retorted. The older sibling immediately stopped laughing to address her younger brother with a look of suspicion and confusion. What about me and Sasuke? Isn't he your boyfriend? Edward baited, slyly. His sister promptly froze up, her face heating up. The boyfriend, Databeo, she exclaimed in disbelief. Ed had an evil glint in his eyes. Oh, yeah, he challenged, tauntingly. I wouldn't call kissing a guy being just friends. He needed so payback from all of Naruto's teasing. And if he had to stoop as low as her, so be it. I told you it was an accident, Naruto retorted, feeling incredibly flustered. He scoffed, not believing her. I wouldn't call kissing a guy more than once to be all accidents. Well, they are. Databeo. Alphonse watched with a tired sigh as his siblings got into another heated argument. They were both so stubborn and hot-headed, but their quarrel did bring him a sense of nostalgia. It brought him back to the days when they were all together like family with Mom. Even though their mother was no longer here, it's still like their family was back together. He was abruptly startled out his musings when he heard an excited squeal. What's got you all excited? Edward yelled, angrily, covering his ears. That unexpected screech didn't do his eardrums any favors. Naruto didn't answer as she bounced away gleefully to whatever caught her attention. She pressed her face against one of the shop's window view where they show their latest products. Her entire body was radiating with joy as there were hearts in her cerulean blue eyes as she gazed, dazzlingly at the sword in full display. Awesome, 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 Naruto chanted, happily. Edward and Alphonse over their elder sister's shoulders to see what got her squealing like a girl on a shopping spree. When they saw that it was a simple katana encased in elegantly patterned black and blue sheath, they shared looks of utter disbelief and bewilderment. This sword is awesome. So cool. Beautiful. The female Uzumaki cooed, delightfully. Sister, I didn't know you were into that kind of stuff, like weaponry, Alphonse uttered, sheepishly, not knowing what to say. This was something new about their sister. Ignoring him, Naruto spun around and faced Edward with a pleading stare. Ed, please buy it for me, she requested, pointing an excited finger at the katana. Ed crossed his arms, scowling. Why should I? His sister pouted, cerulean blue eyes growing unbearably wide, giving him the puppy dog look. Please, buy it. The Full Metal Alchemist scoffed and turned away. No way. Why don't you buy it yourself? I don't have enough money, she pouted, shamefully. Well, sucks to be you, he responded, uncaringly as he began walking away. Edward, Naruto fumed. You stupid, short idiot. Tick marks instantaneously sprang all over Ed's head as he spun around so fast, it was amazing his whole upper back didn't snap. Who are you calling short? He exploded. Alphonse sighed once again as his two older siblings got into yet another fight. The sight of a gathered crowd grabbed his attention. He strolled away to see what all the commotion was. Noticing Al's disappearance, Naruto ceased her argument with Ed to address it. Hey, where did Al go? Edward's blonde brows scrunched together in confusion, his golden gaze searching for his little brother. Where did he go? I don't know. He was here a minute ago. Cerulean blue eyes spotted a familiar tall suit of armor amidst a crowd of people. There, she pointed towards the crowd. Al's there. Edward, having spotted his brother as well, immediately ran off towards the large group of people to join him, his older sister not far behind him. When they regrouped, Winry was already there standing next to Alphonse. Naruto watched uninterested as it was just a simple automail arm wrestling match. The whole entire premise was boring. Why don't they skip the kiddie stuff and do some actual sparring? She observed with dry amusement as Edward was easily riled into competing in the arm wrestling competition by the announcer making fun of his height. She sighed in hopelessness. Her brother really needed to fix that complex of his. If he was a shinobi, enemy ninjas were use it against him and kill him. Although, she'd die before she let that happen. Edward decided to teach these bastards a lesson for calling him a pipsqueak. He would show them that this pipsqueak was not someone to mess with. A victorious smirk graced his lips as he completely totaled the bulky dude's automail. Let's try that again. Whose automail is a pile of trash? He said, rhetorically with a mocking tone. My automail is the best. Winry cheered, happily. No sooner a large crowd of automail mechanics gathered around Ed to admire and praise the craftsmanship of his automail. Winry wasted no time to bask in the glory and proudly proclaim that she was the wonderful mechanic that made the blonde alchemist automail. Al chuckled to himself as he watched Edward's patience wearing thin and Winry obliviously glorying the work of her automail. This takes you back, doesn't it, sister? He turned only to realize that Naruto was gone. While Edward was busy with arm wrestling, Naruto decided to entertain herself with the children of Rush Valley. She always adored kids. They were so full of life and endless potential. They were seeds of the next generation. The easiest and simplest way she thought of to entertain these little balls of sunshine was to jungle for them. Being a ninja, jungling 5 flaming torches was fairly easy to do, using a bit of wind chakra to keep the torches airborne and in her control. Not only was this entertaining, but good practice for wind chakra control. The children oohed and awed at her performance while the parents observed, fascinated by the display. For the grand finale, the blonde Kunoichi tossed all 5 of the torches and caught each of them on her hands, foot, and nose, perfectly balancing them with wind chakra in each. The onlookers were in complete awe at her performance and graciously applauded her. She tossed the torch that was on her foot up and smoothly caught in her hand. The one of her nose was already in her other hand. She blew out the fire, distinguishing the torches before tossing them away. That was so cool, awesome, so wonderful. The children cheered, making Naruto's heart swelled up with joy. Children are always great inspiration. She hoped that they would grow up to be wonderful and aspiring adults. Sister, the sound of metal hitting the ground and Al's frantic cry caught the female Uzumaki's attention. No sooner she spotted Al in the distance, closing in on her, inch by inch. He seemed to be troubled for some reason. What's wrong, Al? She asked, worriedly. Sister, you have to help us look. Alphonse cried out, urgently. She tilted her head in confusion, not understanding the dilemma. Look for what? Ed's pocket watch has been stolen. Wonders of the world. Urgh, Naruto groaned. How far away is this guy? They were walked around a barren pathway on a mountainside. Naruto shrugged off her orange jacket earlier, revealing a mesh shirt underneath, and using the jacket to shield herself from the blazing rays of the sun. I don't know. Winry moaned in agony, her face dripping with sweat. They say he lives around because of the rare ores he could find for his automail. The older blonde woman threw a sharp glare at her younger brother. Well, we wouldn't be in the mess if someone was more responsible with their belongings. Edward growled at his sister, feeling incredibly irritated. He was already angry enough when his pocket watch got stolen. He didn't need a lecture. Don't start with me, Naruto. Just then the group of 4 heard the cry of a bird. They gazed overhead to see a small white pigeon flying around in circles above them. What's it doing? Alphonse asked no one in particular. Naruto's cerulean blue eyes caught the tiny package strapped to its leg. It must be a message bird. To CH. Did one have to show up now? In the open? Couldn't it be a little more discreet? She sighed as she slowly lifted up her left arm for the pigeon to land on. The pigeon took the initiative, squawking once, then swooped down. Edward, Alphonse, and Winry backed up a little in surprise, watching as the pigeon descended towards the eldest of Elric's siblings. It flipped its wings a couple of times to slow down its landing, and then firmly dug its talons on Naruto's arm. Naruto took a note strapped from Bird. With a flick of her arm, the pigeon flew away. She inwardly groaned at the fancy embroidery, then opened the envelope. She read through the letter. Well, she would if she didn't have 3 people breathing down her neck. Her blonde brow twitched in annoyance. She held down the paper so noisy eyes won't be able to read what was written. The blonde Kunoichi turned to fix her brothers and friend an unamused glare. Do you mind? They all stepped back. What's that letter for? Ed asked, suspiciously. Naruto rolled her eyes. Looks like they still have some trust issues that needs working out. It's just a love letter, Ed. Winry seemed to gasp in delight. A love letter. And they had a pigeon send it to you. How romantic. Yeah, she drawled out, uninterested in the letter. Couldn't Kakashi-sensei hang on to these until I got back? She inwardly cursed. The blonde Uzumaki then spotted a figure in the corner of her peripheral vision. It was a dark-skinned girl holding something silver and shiny in her hand. Hey, isn't that your pocket watch, Ed? She pointed out with her finger. Huh, where? Ed's golden orbs trailed the spot where his sister's finger was pointing. When he spotted the girl, an evil smirk formed on his lips. I got you now, he roared, maniacally. Naruto smirked, amused. Really? Does he have to show off? She watched as he alchemized the surrounding areas to get a better footing as he chased after the thief. She's got to admit, Ed's alchemy has drastically improved since the last time they've met. Before, he could only mold small figurines, like dolls and horses. But now, he was creating pillars of carefully sculpted and systemic rocks. Her little brother really did turn out quite the young man while she was away. We better chase after those two boneheads, Winry suggested, reminding Naruko that Alphonse went to help Edward catch the thief. Naruko tried slowing her pace to match Winry's, which wasn't very hard to do. However, her legs wouldn't stop twitching for her to turn a casual jog to a full-on sprint. The two girls arrived just in time to see Al trapping the girl inside a cage. Naruko watched with a small sense of fascination as a cannon shot out of the girl's leg, which were both automail. Now that's what someone calls being prepared. The dark-skinned girl tried to make another grand escape, but Naruko was already on her tail. And so was Winry. Both blonde girls grabbed one of the thief's arms tightly, not letting her go. Now, that wasn't so hard, was it? Winry asked, rhetorically with a smirk. Naruko pressed her fingers against the girl's pressure points because, with years as a trained ninja, a deadly assassin, it had become second nature to her. Never know when someone might try something. Better safe than sorry. The dark-skinned thief smiled, nervously, wiggling the arm Naruko was holding, uncomfortable. Good job, guys, Ed shouted. Don't let her go. Of course not. Winry's expression turned into one of pure joy. Not until I've had the chance to look at her automail. Edward and Alphonse collapsed anime style, and Naruko let out an amusing giggle. Typical Winry. Just then a door to a nearby house opened up, and a woman with short, brown hair peeked out. Oh, who are they, Paninia? Are they your friends? The woman asked in a kind voice filled with curiosity. The dark-skinned girl and thief, now known as Paninia, let out a nervous laugh. Well, not exactly. We just met. The brown-haired woman was now identified as Saddle the Colt, and her husband was dark-haired man with glasses named Riddle. He was an automail engineer along with his gruff father, Dominic. While Paninia went off to introduce Winry, Edward, and Alphonse to Dominic, her mechanic, Naruko went off on her own to read the love letter. She found one of the rooms with a large round table. She sat on one of the chairs and began reading the letters. She scowled as she read the contents of the letter. It was always these same old, crappy love letters. The one where the suitor talks about how pretty she is or how much of powerful and elegant ninja they presume she is. Letters that are meant to shower her with affection and praise, hoping to flatter her enough to consider dating the one who wrote it. At first, the blonde Uzumaki was genuinely and wholeheartedly flattered by the confession letters, her heart ready to burst every time she reads the I love you parts. She would often be filled with anticipation, excitement, and nerve-wracking rapture at receiving such wondrous words of admiration and intense infatuation. How could she not? Naruko had been spent all her childhood life, waiting, yearning for someone to acknowledge her, to show her some form of acceptance. She was a lonely, depressed, little girl hiding behind a courageous bravado and cheerful smile. However, no, these letters meant nothing to her now. The past year, the excitement turned into boredom as more and more confession letters piled up in her back door ever since she became recognized as the heroine of the Fourth War. It was becoming a terrifying, redundant, and unintentional, backhanded compliment. Of course, Naruko still felt a vague sense of happiness all the compliments and praise over all her hard work, showing that her efforts and sheer determination to be acknowledged was not a waste of time. She had finally gained something she had longed for since moving back to the Leaf Village, and still gets that same feeling of pride and joy whenever someone acknowledges her accomplishments. Conversely though, in some twisted sense, now an essence of suppressed anger and loathing bitterness coursed within her. At first, Naruko told herself time and time again that it wasn't right for her to feel this way towards someone who hadn't done anything negative towards her. She remembered telling Sakura, Ino, and Hinata about all the love letters she had received after the war. Sakura and Ino encouraging her to go meet some of the guys who wanted to date her, insisting that it was a perfect opportunity to find a suitable boyfriend for herself since she was getting close to that age where she was suitable and practically of marrying age. After all, she was almost 18 at the time. Most kunoichi are married by then or 21 at the lastest. The only few exceptions are her parents, for example, since they got married at age 23 or 24. Though, the main cause of that was the Third Great Shinobi World War. It was a not very good idea to start a family in the middle of war. Not a very wholesome environment to raise children, knowing that once they get old enough and graduate from the academy, they would be sent off to fight in the war. Hinata, on the other hand, did not pressure Naruko like Sakura and Ino. The blonde Uzumaki understood that the latter two were only thinking about her best interest at heart. They only wanted her to be happy after all the crap she'd been through in life. But, sometimes, they don't give the best advice. That's why she could always count on the Hyuga heiress's input, ideas, and suggestions on these matters of the heart. Hinata had told her that she should not worrying too much about marriage. It was only stressing her out. She should do what was best for herself. She shouldn't about concepts about being obligated to marry at a certain age. It wasn't a very healthy way to start a relationship. The only thing she needed to do was to follow her heart. If it doesn't seem right or if she does not feel anything for suitors of these letters, then it was just never meant to be. The simplicity of the advice was so amazing, it left Naruko wondering why didn't she think of it herself. Why should she give in to one of these suitors? She could admit that some of them may be nice guys looking for genuine love and companionship, and she had gone on dates with some of them. Nothing happened much, really. Just a little dinner and chit-chat to get to know one another. But there was never any spark. No hugs, no kisses. Just a simple, one-date dinner. She had never went out with any of them again. Hinata was right. She shouldn't try too hard to please these men. What was the point if it was confiscating her own happiness? And besides, what would they think of her if she wasn't the heroine of the war? These questions often pop up bitterly in her head when it finally dawned on her that most of these men were only interested in her because of her prowess and status. Where was all this love and affection when she needed it most, when she was a little girl forced away from her adopted family? Naruko quickly shook her head, knowing she was entering resentful and surly unwanted territory. It was not these men's fault. Like she had said before, just like she didn't know them, they did not know her. Though, one question remained. Who was the idiot that told them that she turned 18? Ever since her 18th birthday, confession letters sometimes turned into marriage proposals. Erg, the sheer amount of marriage offers were aggravating to say the least. She now knew why Sasuke got so annoyed with his fangirls. Oh, she perfectly understood how frustrating it could be when someone doesn't take the hint. Although she was never as rude as Sasuke in her rejections, the blonde Kunoichi was sincerely hoping that they would figure out she was not interested in dating any of them, let alone marriage. And they found out the blonde Uzumaki was the daughter of the 4th Hokage, the famous and well-renowned Yellow Flash of the Leaf. It had gotten so much worse. She had gotten to twice as many love letters and marriage proposals, her suitors seeming even more determined to take her as a bride and, eventually, a wife. Naruko sighed. All of this was giving her a headache. Her cerulean blue eyes looked down at the table to see shredded pieces of paper and shattered gold jewelry of what seemed to be a necklace scattered about. Oops, she must have destroyed them when she was lost in thought, deeply trying to suppress her anger. She shook her head. Oh, well, nothing she could do about it now. She took all the scattered pieces and dumped them into a nearby trash can. Naruko went around the house in search of her younger brothers. She found them in a small room with the heavily pregnant Sadala. It feels warm, she heard Alphonse mumble, voice full of wonder. Edward then placed his own human hand upon the woman's tummy, his golden eyes sparkling with fascination as a small wondrous awe escaped from his mouth. Naruko watched from by the doorway, a joyous smile gracing her lips. She listened with a feeling of bliss as her brothers enthralled themselves in the wonders of childbirth. How amazing women to carry such a small ball of life in their stomach for 9 months. Something so simple yet beautiful, creating human life that not even alchemy could do. She then pressed her lips together in deep thought. Have Ed and Elle had the talk yet? They were both young teenage boys, so they should know where babies come from, right? A sense of nervous anxiety coursed through her. Should she give the talk? Hello. You're Naruko, right? The blonde Uzumaki snapped out of her thoughts. She blinked in confusion. Then she realized that she's been spotting as 3 pairs of eyes were staring at her. Sadala's brown eyes was looking at her with such loving kindness. Edward's golden gaze held a sense of annoyance and indifference, and Alphonse's was just blank, but she could feel the delight and pleasure in them. Oh, she smiled, sheepishly, knowing she was caught spying. She stepped inside the room. You can come closer, dear, Sadala said, kindly, beckoning the young, blonde woman over. Naruko tentatively took the initiative until she just a foot away from the seated pregnant. You could feel the baby, the brown-haired woman egged her, eagerly. That caused Naruko to take a step back in shock, feeling flustered. And no, I shouldn't. I would just, she was cut off from her self-induced rant when the kind woman gently took her hand and placed it on her enlarged belly. Naruko's cerulean blue eyes widened before lowering into a sense of contentment as she took the invitation and slowly guided her hand gently around the brown-haired woman's stomach. Suddenly, she felt a small thumb. The baby kicked. It actually kicked. A feeling of exhilaration erupted inside her, and her lips turned upward in a blissful smile. It's so warm. Naruko spoke, softly. Edward was watching his sister feel around the woman's belly, trying to be as gentle as possible with small, content smile. You are through this miracle yourself one day, Naruko, Sadala said with a smile. Naruko quickly retracted her, jumped up in slight shock, her cheeks turning a light shade of pink as she began to feel flustered. Oh, no, she denied. No way, I'm not. Her voice lowered and bit due to disfavor. I'm not ... the marrying type. I'm not what most men would find attractive. Oh, nonsense, dear, the brown woman said, politely. You are a very pretty woman. No, really, I'm tomboyish and brash, and I lack any sort of femininity. Most guys would want a girl who's delicate and ladylike, and I am just not it, Naruko reasoned. But what about that love letter you got, sister? Alphonse cut in, wondering why his sister was downplaying herself so much. Ed watched his sister's reaction, quietly, not caring to engage. And for a split second he thought he saw something before Naruko's lips split into a crooked smile. It was just for a micro of a second. It was so fast, he would missed it if he wasn't paying attention or even blinked. But was that? Did Naruko's face darken into a displeased frown for just a sec? He frowned at thought, ready to question her, but was interrupted. Oh, that, hell. It was just a silly prank, Naruko chuckled, boisterously. A prank? Al seemed genuinely confused, questions raising. The eldest of the Elric siblings nodded. Yeah, I get love letters all the time. None of them are actually serious. Who in the right mind would love me anyway? They must be either desperate or crazy, she inwardly thought, bitterly. You shouldn't sell yourself short, Naruko, sadly encouraged. If you do get love letters like your brothers say you do, then there is some nice guy waiting for the chance to go out with you. You should give them a chance. Naruto twitched a little before forming a perfectly designed, crafted, forced smile. Yeah, I'll think about it. She desperately needed to get out of here. She did not want to talk about her love life or lack of. Ed's golden eyes never left his sister's form. She's been acting sort of weird ever since she's gotten that love letter. Sort of stressed out, tensed, and agitated. It was like the topic made her fraudy high-strung. Though, it did not matter to him. How insensitive. Wait, what? He had to do a quick double take to make sure he heard Naruto right, but she was already out of the room. Her voice was so low that it was barely a breathless mumble. But he was absolutely sure he heard her. How insensitive. That's what she said. Edward's lips turned downward into an angry scowl. What the hell was her problem? How could she say something like that? To a pregnant woman, no less. All Sadala and Alphonse were trying to do was reassure her from her disheartening mood. To him, it didn't even matter. He glanced over to Al to see him staring sadly in the direction his sister left, although it doesn't seem like he heard her last words. And neither did Sadala. Ed grew increasingly angry. He was about to go and tell Naruto off when he heard a chair roughly hitting the ground and a pain groan. He quickly rushed to the collapsed woman's side. Hey, Sadala, what's wrong? Al asked in a worried voice, already kneeling next to the pregnant woman. The brown-haired woman held her stomach as another pained moan escaped her. I think ... the babies. See coming. After that unforeseen statement, all hell broke loose. Naruto witnessed a series of events spiral out of control because of the baby's premature birth. She observed as everyone went into disarray over trying to find a doctor to help deliver Sadala's and Riddle's baby. Funnily, it would have amused her to see everyone spazzing out and running around like a bunch of chickens with their heads cut off, if not for the seriousness of the situation. She sighed as discreetly made a couple of clones to gather boiling water, towels, and disinfectant. While her brothers and Dominic were busy trying to cross the bridge to get a doctor, it'd be good to help guide Sadala through her contractions. Granted, the blonde Uzumaki had never once in her life delivered a baby. She had seen Sakura deliver a baby once during one of their missions. And thank God she remembered the instruments that gathered for first aid childbirths. And besides, it wouldn't do her any good to start panicking like an utter fool. She's a Kunoichi, she's more dignified than that. Having a panic attack over this would not look good on her. Not when she's been through worse than seeing a woman going through childbirth, especially when she's not the one experiencing it. Naruto gathered the supplies inside the bedroom Sadala was staying in, her clones already dispelled moments beforehand. What are you doing, Naruto? Winry questioned, curiously watching as the older blonde set the bucket of boiling water, a few towels, and a bottle of disinfectant down. Her pale blue eyes shone with disquiet and concern. We have to help Sadala with her contractions while my brothers get a doctor, Naruto stated, calmly. Unfortunately, Ed and Al failed to get a doctor because, by some sort of horrible twist of fate, the bridge was broken and they couldn't fix. Just led to another slew of panic attacks that had Naruto mentally rolling her eyes and let out an exasperated sigh. Though, she wasn't quite one to talk as she didn't know what to do either, besides getting a doctor herself in record speed. But, that would require blowing her secret. Possible. Fortunately, the blonde Uzumaki was saved when Winry suggested she would deliver the baby. And with her and Paninia at her side, they helped the blonde mechanic complete that task. Now, Naruto knew why people considered a birth of a child was considered one of life's miracles. Even though she was there that one time to see Sakura deliver a baby during their escort mission one time, she had never witnessed it as all she did was help gather supplies to help start the birthing process. So she didn't know to do after the fact as her pink-haired teammate shoved her away, not wanting her to cause the soon-to-be mother any sort of unnecessary distress. This time, the blonde-haired woman got a full frontal view of what delivering a baby was like. If one gets past all the initial panic, hordes of blood and horrid, grotesque pieces of afterbirth, and the stench of disinfectant and bile, it was truly a beautiful sight. It was like digging through a pile of shit to find a shiny, sparkly diamond beneath it all. The birth of a child truly was a miracle. Naruto offered a sad yet heartfelt smile at seeing the new overjoyed mother and father before leaving the room to wash her hands of the aftermath. She was certainly elated to see the rejoicing parents cuddling their newborn son, so incredibly happy in fact. So, she, understandably, felt ashamed of herself when felt a sad pang and a sting of self-pity gnawing at her heart. She was fully aware that she was thoroughly and innocently yet ruthlessly reminded of something she would never have. A family. Though, she does, technically, have her own family with her younger brothers, Edward and Alphonse, estranged it might be. They were still working on regaining their former sister-brother bond. What Naruto wouldn't have would be a loving and devoted husband and children of her own she could dote on. Being reminded of that hurt a lot worse than she cared to show. After calming herself down, the blonde Uzumaki re-entered the room, squishing the initial hurt and sadness at her own self-pity. She smiled brightly at the new parents, giggling to herself as they thought of names for their infant son. Would you like to hold him, Naruto? The question caught the blonde Kunoichi completely off guard. She stared, slightly wide-eyed at the new mother as she held her baby out for her to hold. She nodded, dumbly, not wanting to displease Sadala, and took the baby into her arms. Something akin to euphoric and captivated delight etched inside her as she stared at the newborn infant. He was so small, soft, fragile, and cute. He was absolutely beautiful. No wonder mothers willingly endure pains of childbirth if something as loving and blessed as this awaits them. There was nothing like the feeling of elated happiness recently delivered baby brings. He's beautiful, she told the mother, her tone full of mirth. The brown-haired woman smiled happily. He sure is. You would have a child of your own someday. Soft cerulean blue eyes stared at the infant boy once more. Yeah, Naruto whispered out, her voice full of hope and not lacking any of the usual bitter undertones. Meanwhile, Edward was having a little chat with Peninia about possessions. And by chat, it meant pounding her hand with his automail hand until she gave him his pocket watch back, something she had yet to do thanks to all the shenanigans about the unexpected baby. He just recently found out that Winry sneaked a peek at the insides of his watch, and, although he was pissed off at first, he quickly dismissed his anger when the blonde mechanic began crying. He really hates it when she cries. It made him feel so low, especially when he's the cause of her tears, which is almost all the time. What is this? Ed's curious. Golden eyes gazed at Peninia as she dug inside a trash can, his nose wrinkling with disgust. Why was she digging through trash? He was quickly answered when she pulled out a piece of gold jewelry. Wait, Winry sprung from her chair, appalled. Is that gold? Like real gold? She shouted, completely gobsmacked. Both Winry and Peninia glanced at each other wide-eyed before furiously digging inside the trash, pulling out pieces of the gold jewelry. They laid out every single fragment of the jewelry they managed to salvage from the trash out on the table. Who would throw gold in the trash? Peninia asked, incredibly astonished. Winry just shook her head. I don't know. Is this perhaps one of Saddle's broken jewelry? She questioned. The brown-skinned woman shook her head negatively. No, I've been here plenty of times, and Saddle never had this before. What's going on? Alphonse asked as he entered the room. Winry quickly ushered him over. Al, could you transmute something for me? Sure. He stepped closer, metal feet clanging against the floor. He stopped when he spotted the pieces of gold scattered about on the table. Is that gold? He asked, surprised. Yep, I need you to fix it for me, Winry said. Al nodded, quickly doing what he was asked. He created a transmutation circle on table and placed all the shattered fragments upon it. With a flash of alchemic light, the gold pieced itself together to reveal an astoundingly beautiful, diamond-encrusted, gold, heart-shaped pendant. Who the hell would throw this away? Edward yelled, joining the others at staring at the pendant in awe. This must cost a fortune. Being an alchemist and, therefore, incredibly versed in the different types of minerals, he was well aware that this was real gold and not pyrite, which he believed at first, explaining his initial lack of interest. What are you guys doing? All eyes turned to Naruto as she entered the room with a raised brow. Hey, Naruto, Peninia beckoned the older woman over. Come look at this. See what we found in the trash. Oh, that's the necklace I threw away, Naruto said, casually. What? Various screams of shout echoed around the room as they all stared at her, flabbergasted. Naruto, how could you throw gold away? Winry was the first one to ask, dumbfounded. Where did you get it from? Al questioned, genuine curious, not remembering once that his sister stopped by a shop in Rush Valley, except for the one that sold the sword she was endeared to. I got it from the love letter, she answered as if it was no big deal. What? Another slew of astonished shouts ensues, causing Naruto to flinch at all the yelling. The guy sent you gold. He must be a prince or something. Peninia voiced out, absolutely amazed. He is. What? Naruto flinched, pricking her ears, making sure she didn't go deaf. You guys really need to stop that, she said, annoyed. A prince? Since when were you dating a prince? Edward exclaimed, skeptical. The eldest Elric sighed, tiredly. I am not, Ed. And it was more of a marriage proposal than a love letter. The prince wrote in his letter that he wanted to marry me, and offered the golden pendant as some sort of engagement. I get love letters, marriage proposals, and gifts all the time now, mainly from noblemen, rich businessmen, and royalty. Though I receive love confessions from other men as well, she explained, so casually that it left the other 4 occupants in the room completely awestruck. Sister, when were you so popular? Al asked, slowly and almost speechless. What were you doing the 10 years you were away? Everyone else could only dumbly nod along with Al's question, just as curious as he was. That isn't important, Naruto dismissed. Edward frowned, knowing that his sister was obviously avoiding the question. Why don't go out with any of these guys, Naruto? Winry genuinely questioned. The blonde Uzumaki plopped herself down at a nearby chair. Because none of these men are exactly my type. Her yellow brows scrunched in, contemplatively. Saddle got me thinking, though, about how to find my perfect boyfriend. How? Winry rose of brow, wondering what was on her older friend's mind. What sort of idea did she have to choose between all her supposed suitors, if she hadn't already? Naruto smiled, pleasantly to herself. I've decided to host my own fighting tournament. Why? Ed was the question, confused by his sister's logic. It would help me to decide who to date. So, you're going to go out with whoever the winner is? Al asked. The blonde Kunoichi shook her head. Not exactly. I am going to beat the crap of whoever comes out on top, she replied with smirk, leaving everyone stunned. Because, by the end of the tournament, the winner would have to face me, and let me tell you, only 2 things would happen. Either he impresses me enough or he ends up in the hospital with a bunch of broken bones. His choice, she finished, a sadistic gleam in her eyes. Sister, you violent, Alphonse shivered. Couldn't you choose something more civil? Edward frowned. I agree with Ed, Winry nodded. There must be another way. Do you even have a type? Peninia questioned. My type? Naruto pondered this for a moment. I guess I would like a man who is as strong or stronger than me. A man who's as strong as my father. Someone who's competitive and who I could spare with, always improving ourselves. Someone who could stand next to me as a reliable partner and right-hand man. He doesn't necessarily have to be nice, but sincerely well-meaning and always thinking of our loved one's best interest at heart. He has to be someone I could count on and fight alongside with. Someone who knows and understands me in ways that others don't. I'm also going to need him to willfully act in the shadows for me, as I can't do everything myself, to act as my dark knight. Someone I can consider a lover, a best friend, and a riv. Naruto stopped mid-sentence, blue eyes wide as if she suddenly realized something. Excuse me, I've got to go. Without making a sound, the blonde Uzumaki left the room, leaving Ed, Al, Winry, and Peninia confused. After saying goodbye to Winry and Peninia, Naruto entered the train with Edward and Alphonse as they headed to Dublith. She was eager to meet the teacher that got her little brothers shivering like frightened rabbits. It was amusing to see them give themselves a peep talk as they ventured towards their alchemy teacher's house. This is going to be fun, she giggled to herself. After meeting a large, muscular man named Sig, the door burst open and a foot viciously kicked Ed in the face, sending him flying. Okay, sadly the chapter is over, and if you enjoyed, just leave a like and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.